owner of the US Mega Farm. Video is purement para intratnamiento y no infringe de recos de originales. Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 801, Prodigal Son. PFFT, ha 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 Harkins you, who was lying on the sofa, curled up his legs and looked at his little sister, almost laughed himself to death when he heard what his mother said. Yes, little girl, you have to get used to it, just get used to it. While laughing, Kinzu pointed at his little sister, and that made the little girl hate him with gnashing teeth. Mom Kinru stared at her mother aggrievedly, feeling depressed. Is this really my biological mother? What? At this time, Kin's mother seemed to have just come back to her senses from her own world, with a blank expression on her face, which made Kinru, who was already very depressed, roll her eyes directly. It's okay, you continue. After saying it weakly, the little girl also took off her shoes and sat on the sofa with her legs curled up. Why are you staring at me like that? Is there something on my face? Kinzu touched his face and slyly winked at Kinru. He didn't know why, but he wanted to tease this little girl when he saw her. Humph, of course there are flowers. Kinru curled her lips, leaned her little body towards Yumengyo, and said with a smile. A very big dogtail flower. Pucci. This time, the beautiful Zyu couldn't help it. Looking at Kinzu's depressed face, she laughed out loud. Mom, look at my little sister, she is getting more and more outrageous. Seeing the smile on Kinru's mouth, for some reason, Kinzu's childish heart was aroused, and he pinched his neck and complained to his mother. Go. The two naughty kids go play. Kin's mother waved her hand impatiently. She really didn't have time to take care of the two naughty kids at home. Because, her mind was now completely shocked by the luxurious decoration in the cabin. The dazzling crystal chandelier, although not yet turned on, just looking at the complex shape and the intricate patterns, you can tell that the cost must be very high. The gorgeous but not ostentatious dark gold color makes the whole cabin look high-end but not luxurious. The Mediterranean-style coffee table and sofa were located in the middle of the cabin, which looked spacious and grand. There was even a fireplace that was unique to Western-style buildings. Of course, it was just for decoration. She looked up and looked around. On the walls of the cabin, there were some oil paintings of unknown shapes, which looked particularly unpleasant. Yes, that's right, Mother Keen felt that the oil paintings were particularly annoying. What kind of crap are these paintings? Pointing at the abstract oil paintings hanging on the walls with some dissatisfaction, Keen's mother suggested. Shucks you, next time you go back, buy some landscape paintings to hang. The ones hanging now are too ugly. My Thompson's paintings are better than his. That's right. Hearing her name being mentioned, Thompson quickly ran behind Keen-won, patted her chest and said to Keen-zu, Uncle, can Thompson help you paint? Thompson's paintings are very beautiful. Keen-zu was a little confused by the echo of his mother and the little Thompson, and he finally came to his senses after a long time. Looking at the decorative paintings on the wall, Keen-zu said with a smile, Okay, Mom, you make sense. I'll replace it in a few days. At this time, King's father, who was watching the excitement, came up and waved his hand with a smile. Xiao Zhu, don't listen to your mother's nonsense. These paintings should be worth a lot of money, right? Although he didn't know anything about oil paintings, he knew that these paintings must be expensive just by looking at the decorations of the cabin. Thinking about his son's worth, he definitely couldn't use ordinary paintings, so he asked this question. These paintings are worth a lot of money. King's mother pointed at an oil painting with only a bunch of lines on it with a suspicious look on her face. It was impossible to tell what it was painted. Is this also called a painting? Give me a pen, and I can draw it. Kinzu glanced at his mother and decided to give her something exciting. So he sat up straight and said with a smile, Mom, the one you just pointed out, if it goes to an auction house, it will start at least $200,000 per. King's mother was holding a cup of water handed to her by the beautiful Zhu, ready to take a sip to moisten her throat. As a result, the tea in the cup fell on the solid wood floor, making a crisp sound of porcelain breaking. How much? $200,000, the starting price. Kinzu seemed to have expected it. He wanted to stop Zumengyu when she handed the cup to his mother, but it was too late. Are you kidding? This sentence was said by Kin's father. Although he knew that these oil paintings might be worth a lot of money, he never thought they would be so expensive. $200,000? More than 1 million RMB, right? In his small county, this can buy a 3-bedroom, 2-living-room house, right? There is no way. Nowadays, ordinary people usually like to compare with houses, so that they can have a more intuitive feeling. For example, King's father and mother now. They now have a feeling of unreality. An ordinary oil painting on their son's boat is worth a house. Oh, no. It can't be called ordinary. It should be said that a painting that looks like a ghost painting is actually worth a house that they can't afford even if they struggle all their lives. Shrugging helplessly, Qinzu stood up, took out a tablet from his bag, and searched directly on the internet. Here, look, this is a painting sold at the auction house last year. It is an oil painting by the same person and in a similar style. Taking the tablet, the two elders looked at it carefully. Even Qinwan and Li Jianhua on the side came over. Of course, Qinru, the little girl, is not among them. As the new generation with the most access to the internet, they have seen a lot of similar news on the internet and have long been accustomed to it. Xiaozu, these can't be so expensive. Qin's father handed the tablet in his hand to Qin's mother, pointed to the dozen or so oil paintings hanging on the wall, and felt that his throat was a little dry. Qinzu nodded, sat back on the sofa, and said with a smile, "They are all authentic, and I have asked someone to authenticate them." Unexpectedly, after hearing what Qinzu said, Qin's father's face became unusually serious. You, Qin's father pointed at Qinzu and scolded him with some regret. "You don't know how to use your money. Buy so many useless things, who will see them here?" Looking at his father with a stern voice, Qinzu was a little dumbfounded, and he unconsciously put the cup he had just picked up back, and said with a wry smile, "Well, Dad, don't get excited, listen to my explanation." "Explanation? I'm listening." Qin's father came to the sofa on the other side and sat down angrily, staring at Qinzu, obviously wanting to hear what else he had to say. There was nothing wrong with the luxurious decoration of the villa, and there was nothing wrong with buying an airplane. After all, those could be considered practical. But, looking at the dozen or so oil paintings that looked like ghost paintings, he felt uncomfortable no matter how he looked at them. Chapter 802 Breakfast at Sea. With a loud whistle, the Dekino one slowly left the dock, facing the rising sun, and sailed towards the unknown distance. "You mean, you picked up all these?" The angry expression on Qin's father's face gradually turned into surprise as Qinzu slowly told the story. "Yes, uncle, I can testify that these were salvaged from the sea by Qinzu." At this time, Zhu Mengye also hurriedly helped to speak up, and she was also frightened by Qin's father's gloomy expression. Listening to Qinzu and the others' words, Qin's father's expression was very wonderful. It seemed that he felt that his life was lived in vain. "Xiaozu, you have to hide these things well. Don't let others see them." After the initial shock, Qin's mother came back to her senses and said worriedly, "Don't show off your wealth. You put these things outside. What if they're stolen?" "Mom, don't worry. Not everyone can get on my boat. How could it be stolen?" Qinzu smiled and stood up, and pressed his mother to sit on the sofa. "Besides, even if a thief really came, how would he know that this is valuable?" "That's true." Qin's mother was relieved. Although she was sitting on the sofa, her eyes were always staring at the oil painting on the wall, and she was amazed. "Tell me, why do these foreigners like such strange things? It's like a ghost painting. I want to know this question too." Qinzu shrugged and said with a smile, "It can only be said that the aesthetics of the East and the West are different." As they talked and laughed, time passed unknowingly. Except for the little girl Qinru, who was not interested in the topic between Qinzu and the others, and looked around curiously with Tongton and Lily, the others were very interested in the underwater treasure hunt and kept asking questions. Even brother-in-law Li Jianhua was so excited that he wanted to buy a boat and go out to sea to hunt for treasure. "Brother-in-law, don't think that treasure hunting is an easy thing." Seeing this, Qinzu took the lead in giving him a shot of prevention, and said with a smile, "In the entire United States alone, there are dozens of marine salvage companies, if not hundreds. But how many of them can find treasures?" "That's right." Li Jianhua nodded with a smile, indicating that he understood. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked hurriedly, "By the way, Xiaozu, I saw a news report last time that said a marine salvage company fished out the treasure, but it was robbed by another country." "Yes." Qinzu nodded. He also knew about this matter and explained with a smile. "The main reason is that even if the place where they salvage is not on the high seas, If it is on the high seas, it will be easy. Are you on the high seas? No one will come to rob it, right? Keen's mother asked worriedly. Of course. Kinzu's face was not red and he was not out of breath. He did not realize that he was talking nonsense. He pretended to be serious and said, "These things of mine were salvaged from the high seas. Even if someone comes to ask for them, I will only give them one layer at most." That's good, that's good. Keen's mother breathed a long sigh of relief. In her opinion, since it has been obtained, it must be his family. If someone else comes to snatch it from her now, she will not be willing. Bang bang, there was a knock on the door, and Kinru, who was wandering around, immediately ran over and opened the cabin door. Creak as the cabin door opened, a gust of cool wind suddenly poured in, making the people who were a little thin in clothing couldn't help but sneeze. "Boss, we have arrived. Do we want to stop the ship now?" Eva, wearing a khaki coat, a pair of long boots on her feet, and a wide-brimmed hat on her head, stood at the door with a smile. "Well, let's stop the boat." Kinzu stood up, wrapped his coat around him, and walked out first. Because it was still early, the red sun in the early morning only showed a crescent-shaped smiling face. Standing on the side of the boat, looking at the endless ocean, Kinzu's heart was particularly open. "Boss, what activities will we do later?" "Fishing?" Eva, who had ordered Will to stop the boat and drop anchor, stood behind Kinzu. "Fishing?" Kinzu felt the temperature outside and shook his head with a smile. "No, not fishing yet. The temperature is still a little low in the morning. Let's talk about it after the sun comes out." Eva nodded with a smile, looked at the time, and asked, "Boss, are you going to prepare breakfast now?" "Of course." Kinzu shrugged, turned to look at Eva, and stretched out his hand to gently pinch her pretty face full of exotic charm. "Call me clean, did you hear me?" Being stunned by Kinzu's sudden attack, Eva's fair and pretty face immediately turned red. She looked around with a guilty conscience, and when she saw that no one was paying attention, Eva nodded, agreed softly, and turned around and ran to the back of the cabin. Looking at Eva's hot back, Kinzu raised the unlush ankle with a smirk on his face, and sniffed it carefully under his nose. It seemed that there was still a trace of fragrance left. "Brother, what are you doing?" At some point, the younger sister Kinru suddenly appeared behind Kinzu, and stretched out her little hand to pat his shoulder hard. Startled, Kinzu glanced at him with a guilty conscience, and rarely quarreled with her, but asked, "Why did you come out?" "It's a bit cold outside." "It's boring inside." The little girl looked like a little adult, with her hands behind her back, pretending to be an old teacher, pacing back and forth on the deck. Kinzu saw this and curled his lips helplessly. Just when he was about to speak, he saw Eva coming out with something. "Okay, come and help if you're bored." After greeting the little girl, Kinzu walked towards Eva and took the oven from her. He really forgot that the oven is needed for breakfast. Of course, Kinzu, who was walking in a hurry, naturally did not see the pair of complicated eyes behind him. Seeing Kinzu coming with the oven, the little girl retracted her thoughts and greeted him excitedly. "Wow, brother, are you preparing food?" Looking at the big bag of ingredients in her hand, thinking that they will become delicious dishes to be eaten by herself in a while, the little girl suddenly felt so happy. "Ha ha, of course, you can't not eat in the morning." Kinzu stopped the work in his hands and looked at the little girl with a smile on his face. "What do you like to eat? Pick it out yourself and I'll make it for you." "Really?" Kinru's eyes suddenly lit up, and she looked up at her brother and asked expectantly, "It's more real than real gold?" Chapter 803 Snick. Time passed slowly, and the rising sun gradually came to the top of the head. The endless sea surface was like a smooth mirror, clearly reflecting the outline of a fishing boat. After a hearty breakfast, everyone took a small stool and started their own fishing business. Of course, some people like it, and some people don't. Those who don't like fishing by themselves and the two little guys who want to fish but can't reach the fishing rod are also playing on the deck. Well, it's playing. Two pure white huskies, almost as tall as Kinzu's calves, don't know how they got on the boat, and now they are wagging their tails and circling around the two little guys. Because, in their opinion, these two guys are the same age as their former little masters, and maybe they will give them delicious food. But they are destined to be disappointed. These two poor little guys still have to pester their parents for food, so where can they get food? The few people who were able to give them food were immersed in the excitement of fishing at this time, so how could they have time to pay attention to them? "Wow, brother, you are so great." At this moment, two graceful figures stood on the side of the boat. Kinyo held Zumengyo's hand and looked at the sea with excitement. At this moment, the originally calm sea surface has been swaying with waves, and the source of the waves is a golden fish that has already emerged from the sea. Hurry up, don't let it run away, hurry up and get it up. Stamping her feet anxiously, the little girl shouted at her brother with a nervous face. Ha, don't worry, it will be up soon. The beautiful Zhu was a little overwhelmed by her sister-in-law's enthusiastic shaking, and hurriedly smiled to comfort her. Compared with the gentleness of the beautiful Zhu, King Zhu was not so polite about this. While reeling in the line, he turned his head and said with a smile, "Girl, do you know what it means that the emperor is not anxious, but the eunuch is?" "You?" The little girl was choked by her brother's words. She stamped her feet in dissatisfaction and snorted. "HMPH, stinky brother, if you let it run away, I won't give you lunch at noon." "Ha, don't worry, you don't have this chance." King Zhu laughed proudly, thinking that you were kidding. "I will miss when I fish." After reeling in a few turns of line quickly, King Zhu was about to use force to get the guy in the sea, but he felt his hand suddenly lighten. "It's broken." With a thump in his heart, King Zhu quickly turned his eyes around, but saw that the sea was empty. Where was the shadow of the golden fish? Suddenly, there was silence all around, followed by a burst of laughter. Especially from Zhu Mengyu and his younger sister behind him. King Zhu hurriedly felt his face burning. "There is no way, who made me say too much just now?" Scratching his head in embarrassment, King Zhu turned around and faced his sister's contemptuous eyes, feeling quite ashamed. Swallowing his saliva, King Zhu said dryly, "Well, wait, I'll bat you one soon." TSK. King Zhu made a disdainful hiss, turned to the beautiful Zhu, and said with a pout, "Sister-in-law, let's go, let's watch my sister go fishing, and ignore this idiot." King Zhu. King Zhu changed the bait and glared at the little girl fiercely. "Who are you calling stupid?" Whoever I knows. Turning her head, she stuck out her pink little tongue at King Zhu, and the little girl pulled the beautiful Zhu and walked to the bow of the boat. This girl pouting in dissatisfaction, King Zhu turned around and prepared to concentrate on catching fish for a while. Apart from other things, just to convince this little girl, I have to do it fiercely. So, before Zhu Mengyu and the other girl reached the boat, they heard the sound of water splashing behind them. Could it be that my brother fell into the water? Hearing the sound behind her, the little girl turned around in fright, only to see that her brother was fine, standing on the side of the boat, reeling in the fishing line quickly. "Hey, it seems that I caught another fish." At this time, Zhu Mengyu also turned around and looked at King Zhu's actions, and couldn't help but let out a light exclamation. However, deep in her heart, the beautiful Zhu was a little suspicious. It seems that sometimes, the guy in front of her really can't be inferred by common sense. Isn't my luck so good? King Zhu hesitated a little, moved her feet, and finally didn't dare to go over to take a look. After all, she just disliked him. At this time, if she went over again, who knows how her brother would tease her. While the little girl was hesitating, the sound of water on King Zhu's side became louder, and the movement of reeling in the line was also a little faster. Let's go and take a look." The little girl was still hesitating, but Zhu Daimei didn't hesitate at all, and pulled her to the back. Not only them, but also King's father and Li Jianhua looked at each other, put down the fishing rods in their hands, stood up and walked to the back. They felt bitter. The same bait, the same fishing gear. How come this kid has fish so quickly? Moreover, it's the kind that keeps on coming. Could it be that his bait is fake? While walking, King's father kept muttering in his heart. Turning his head to look at the eldest son-in-law beside him, he didn't expect that this guy also had a suspicious face. Soon, everyone gathered together and came to the stern together, looking at the sea together. The originally calm sea surface, at this moment, seemed to have been thrown into a huge stone, and countless ripples were rippling. And in the middle of the ripples, a long thing that looked like a snake was twisting its slippery body. King Zhu was originally very excited and looked at the sea surface, but when she looked at it, she felt goosebumps all over her body. "Ah! Brother, snake, snake!" The little girl hugged the beautiful Zhu beside her tightly, and her voice was trembling. "Snake? Where is the snake?" After being called out by her, the beautiful Zhu, who was a step late and had not had time to look at the sea surface, was also scared. The pair of perfect little feet were directly raised, as if the snake was under her feet. "No, it's in the sea, in the sea." She closed her eyes and pointed to the sea, and the little girl didn't dare to raise her head, for fear that she would accidentally see it. She was so regretful now. Why did you come to join in the fun? Although she closed her eyes now, as long as she thought of the thick snake in the sea, she felt a little cold in her heart. The beautiful lady's you, who was frightened by her, didn't even look at it, but directly pulled the little girl back, as if she was afraid that the snake would suddenly fly up. Chapter 804 Conger Eel. The two little girls were shouting and yelling here, which had already attracted the attention of others. Not only did Qin's father and Li Jianhua feel a little numb on their scalps. Even Qin Wan and Qin's mother, who were looking after the two little ones on the deck, picked up the little ones and walked over here quickly. Of course, the two little ones in white also followed quickly. Although they could not see the situation on the sea due to the obstruction of the ship's side, it did not prevent them from shouting 666. Hey, no, they shouted, woof woof woof, shout you, come on, break the fishing line quickly, don't wait for it to come up. Qin's father took out a lighter from his pocket and stepped forward, wanting to help his son release the big snake. No, Dad, what are you doing? Qin's Yu turned around and docked the lighter in his father's hand, and said with a bit of a smile, Dad, this is not a snake, it's a conger eel, and it tastes very good. Conger eel? What is that? Qin's father and Li Jianhua looked at each other, feeling a little confused. Qin's mother and Qin Wan, who arrived later, felt even more puzzled. Where is the snake? Where is the snake? Qin's mother, who was holding Tongton, looked around and didn't find any trace of the snake. She urged anxiously, why don't you kill the snake? What if it bites a child? This. Being stared at by his wife, Qin's father was speechless. He didn't know what to say now. Mom, it's okay, Qin's Yu helped his father out of the predicament. He didn't stop his hand movements, but smiled and explained, what snake is there? It's a sea eel. My little sister doesn't know what to say. What's sea eel? It's obviously a python. Hearing her brother's words, Qinru raised her head and refuted very dissatisfiedly. However, she herself felt that her words were a little lacking in confidence. After all, her brother is a professional fisherman, he will definitely not make a mistake. Of course, Qin's Yu didn't know what his little sister thought, otherwise, he would be depressed to death. After a long time of emotional struggle, in his sister's heart, he is just a professional fisherman. Qin's mother, who was a little confused by the two, didn't care about what they said, and came over directly and looked up at the sea. It didn't matter if she saw it, even though she was mentally prepared, Qin's mother couldn't help but take a breath. It was all because of the guy in front of her, although it looked black, but its mouth was full of tiny teeth. Not only is its body thicker than an adult's wrist, but the length exposed above the sea is nearly 2 meters. What on earth is this? This is a conger eel, just like a yellow eel. Qin's Yu was a little helpless. No one believed what he said. Thinking of this, Qin's Yu couldn't help but look back. Well, they are all my family members. I can't even find someone to explain. Shaking his head, Qin's Yu simply ignored the whispers of the people behind him and began to concentrate on dealing with the guy in front of him. Because, he suddenly remembered that these fishermen in his family can't speak Chinese. Fortunately, although this guy looks a bit fierce, he is not a large carnivorous fish after all. After a few minutes of competition, with Qin's Yu's loud shout, Qin's father, who had been instructed long ago, quickly handed over the net bag. Okay, it's done. Putting down the fishing rod, Qin's Yu stood on the deck with the net bag, his face full of smiles. But at this moment, a scene that made him a little depressed happened. The large group of people who were originally surrounding him to watch the fun all stepped back several steps at this time. It seemed that they were afraid that this guy would suddenly jump out and hurt people. Come on, little girl, come and take a look. How does this guy look like a snake? Qin's Yu threw the net bag on the ground in annoyance, waved at Qinru, and motioned her to come over. No, I won't. Looking at the black and slippery big guy on the ground, Qinru quickly shook her little head with a look of disgust. Even if it's not a snake, it will definitely bite people. Qin's Yu was actually a little speechless about what his sister said. Looking at the conger eel on the ground, especially looking at its mouth full of small teeth, if you say it won't bite, Qin's Yu himself doesn't believe it. Okay, you are the one who is too nosy. Qin's Yu waved his hand in annoyance and gestured directly to Simon, who was cleaning the fishing net. Boss, what's up? After wiping his hands, Simon came over with a big smile on his face. His life has been so comfortable lately. He can just fly a helicopter for 2 laps every day, and no longer have to walk in the cold wind and drive a small boat to patrol the sea. Not only that, every night when he goes home, there are delicious meals and, well, a warm bed. When he thought of this, Simon couldn't help but sigh. He hadn't slept with his wife for so long, but he didn't expect her body to be so good and so smooth. Hi, Kinzu was a little speechless, and waved in front of this guy with a silly smile on his face. Oh, boss, what's up? He quickly wiped the saliva that was about to flow out, and Simon's big black face couldn't help but turn red. Here, this. Kinzu didn't want to argue with this guy, so he handed the neck bag to him and said with a smile, "Take it and deal with it quickly, we'll have a snack at noon." Looking at the thick seal in the neck bag, Simon couldn't help but have some wrong thoughts again. Fortunately, he braked in time, took the neck bag, and patted his chest to guarantee, "Leave it to me, you'll definitely see it on the lunch table." "Okay, go quickly, I'll go fishing for a while." After waving his hand and sending this guy away, Kinzu said to his father and brother-in-law who are still watching, "I say, are you still going to fish?" After Kinzu said this, the two of them woke up from their dreams and hurried to their fishing positions. "It's all because of you, this stinky boy, that all my fish ran away." Picking up his own fish hook and looking at the empty one on it, Kin's father complained angrily. Kinzu was so angry in his heart, what kind of fishing item is this, and he blamed himself for not catching any fish. However, as the saying goes, a higher-ranking official can crush a person to death. Although he didn't know what rank his father was, it was still easy for him to crush him to death. Therefore, Kinzu could only mutter a few times in frustration and continue fishing. Anyway, he also has his own way to get back at the game. Well, you can tell by looking at Kin's father's face at the moment. While quickly retrieving the line, Kinzu couldn't help but curl at the corners of his mouth with pride. Fighting with yourself who has a cheat? Isn't that asking for trouble? A life with cheats, tough and needless to explain. Si este escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 805. Li Jianhua is shocked. The north wind was blowing. Although the sun was still shining brightly at noon, it was still a little cold after staying outside for a long time. This weather is really not suitable for going out to sea. Kinzu tightened his coat and rubbed his hands. He felt that the seawater was really very cold. Yes, it's too cold. Kinru also rubbed her hands involuntarily. After the initial excitement, she gradually felt cold. Unfortunately, as soon as she finished speaking, she was ruthlessly suppressed by Kin's mother. "It's not you. You want to eat seafood for no reason. It makes your brother restless in such a cold day. Blame me again." Kinru pouted her lips and chose to remain silent wisely. Because she knew that even if she continued to talk, she would still be ruthlessly suppressed by her mother in the end. Who made her not as favored as her brother since she was a child? "Okay, Mom, go in quickly. The wind outside is a bit strong." Seeing this, Kinzu hurriedly pushed his mother into the cabin. Although he loved to argue with his little sister, he didn't want to really make this little girl angry. "Girl, come here quickly, take all these over, and let that uncle clean them up." After tidying up the fish basket and looking at the dozen large and small sea fish in it, Kinzu handed it directly to Kinru and asked her to give it to Simon on the side to clean. "So many." Kinru was a little surprised after taking the fish basket, and even the aggrieved expression on her face disappeared at this moment. Although she watched Kinzu catch fish one after another, she didn't expect that there would be so many in such a short time. Originally, she wanted to take it and go directly, but after trying, Kinru couldn't help pouting again. "Brother, I can't carry it." Kinzu looked at her speechlessly. "Just drag it along." Her. Looking at Kinzu in confusion, Kinru tried to drag the neck bag directly on the deck, and it actually moved. However, it was still a bit difficult. Without Kinzu's words, Zhu Mengyo, who was helping to pack up, stood up and walked over with a smile, leaving Kinzu dumbfounded. "No way, you're leaving me alone to clean up." Staring at the backs of the two girls with a helpless look, Kinzu shrugged and had to clean up by himself. He was still doing well. Although he was a little tired, he still had a rich harvest. In comparison, Kin's father and Li Jianhua were a little bleak. Especially when his children dragged a neck bag of sea fish and passed by them, Kin's father couldn't help but want to come over to see if Kinzu was cheating. These fish were not caught at all, but he caught them with a net. Because the two of them had not caught anything so far. Kin's father was better, at least there were fish that took the bait. Although he was freed by this guy when he was lifted out of the water, at least he saw sea fish. Perhaps because he was too close to Qinzu and was influenced by him, Lei Jing had a very depressing morning. He sat on a small stool and almost fell asleep. He stared at the sea for a whole morning and wanted to go down and press the float down. But there was no way. Except when there were wind and waves, the float would float with the wind. After a whole morning, the float was just like fixed on the sea. It was motionless. Xiao Zhu, tell me honestly, did you do anything with your bait? Li Jianhua put away the fishing rod in frustration, washed his hands, and after returning to the cabin, he sat down next to Qinzu. No, how could I do anything? Qinzu shrugged innocently and said with a smile, I have always been good at fishing. Even these old fishermen under me can't catch up with me. How could it be? Li Jianhua looked at him in surprise when he heard this. Have you fished before? No. Qinzu shook his head. However, his next sentence made Li Jianhua want to vomit blood. Fishing, it depends on your talent, maybe I am more suitable for fishing. Touching his nose, Qinzu smiled brightly. Originally, the beautiful Zhu had been watching Qinzu and the others chatting. She felt that she could not get a word in at the moment in this family atmosphere. But until this moment, looking at Qinzu's smug smile, she really couldn't stand it anymore, so she came over with a cup of hot water. Okay, drink some water quickly. Smiling, she handed the water to Qinzu. The beautiful Zhu sat beside him and whispered, Dear, your smile just now is really asking for a beating. Other smile froze on his face, and Qinzu glared at the beautiful Zhu with a bit of a laugh. Who knew that she didn't pay any attention to him at all? After she finished speaking, she went straight to her mother and started to act like a good baby. Oh, no, it's a good wife. There's nothing she can do. She has a bad canal and people who can't be messed with. Sighing, Qinzu stood up and said with a smile, Okay, I'll go see how they've packed up. It's almost time to prepare lunch. I'll go too, take me with you. Hearing about preparing lunch, Qinru's big eyes lit up immediately, and she almost drooled. Okay, let's go. Nodding indifferently, Qinzu was about to go out, but he felt that his thigh was saved by someone. Uncle. Uncle, we want to go too. Looking at the two little guys pestering him, listening to them chattering and laughing, Qinzu couldn't help but sigh. It's great to be on go, little brat, hurry up and cook. Hearing Qinzu's mumbling, Qinwan rolled her eyes at him unhappily. Saying that he was pretending to be mature in front of them, was he saying that they were all old? I'll go right away, I'll go right away. Qinzu suddenly came to his senses. In this room, except for these little girls, he seemed to be the youngest, right? Thinking of calling himself laborer in front of his parents, Qinzu suddenly had the urge to flee this place quickly. He thought so and did so. Okay, let's go and take a look together. Holding one hand each, Qinzu and Qinru behind him walked to the deck. There, several foreigners were skillfully cleaning Qinzu's morning harvest. A sea base that was nearly half a meter long, Qinzu estimated, should be enough for several people to eat. What's more, there were a lot of cod, herring, and several red snappers. Of course, the long conger eel was indispensable. Boss, what are you going to do with this for lunch? Simon pointed to the clean conger eel on a plate and looked at Qinzu with a smile. He had already decided that if Qinzu said he couldn't do it, he wouldn't mind helping himself. Chapter 806 Let's do exercise together. The sea breeze blew gently, just like the love of lovers, lingering for a long time. Shaking his pure white hair, Daha yawned and stood up from the deck. Woof woof. Awakened by the sound of it getting up, Xiaohe also swayed and slowly stood up. But, looking at it, it seems to be a little inconvenient to move. Hey, little dog. A childish voice sounded in the ears of the two little guys, attracting the attention of the two little guys. Uncle said that we need to exercise after dinner. Coming closer, Tomton's pair of white and tender little hands pinched on her waist, and said in a tone of a little adult, Let's go exercise with me for a while. Blinking his little eyes blankly, Daha turned back and looked at his brother blankly. Although I don't understand what this girl is saying, I have a bad feeling for some reason. Sure enough, before they could react, the little girl got two ropes from somewhere and put them on. Woof woof woof. Now, the two little guys were a little anxious and struggled involuntarily. They were used to freedom, so how could they be willing to be tied up like this? However, just when they were about to move, facing the little girl in front of them who seemed harmless, they didn't dare to move. Be honest, Uncle said, if you don't listen, I will beat you. Raising the small whip in the other hand, The little girl smiled like a little devil. Or holding her little tail between her legs, tracking her little body that was a little inconvenient to move because of eating too much, she slowly moved on the deck. Come on, Lily, I'll give you one. As she said that, the little girl handed a rope in her hand to her brother beside her. Oh, of course, she thought so herself. Who made them twins? Who made their mother forget which child came out first? Here, a little girl led a little boy, holding two little huskies that were almost as tall as their thighs, and they were walking around twisting and turning. On the other side, in the cabin, Kinru was nestling in the arms of the beautiful Zhu, looking at the two confused little huskies not far away with a gloating look on her face. The more Kinru looked at the confused look of the little guy, the funnier it became, and she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Hee, brother, how did you think of doing this to them? Kinzu pouted his lips and took his eyes away from the two idiots. He turned to look at his little sister and said unhappily, "Don't laugh, you also take 2 steps." Other laughter stopped abruptly, and Kinru looked at her brother blankly. Did she hear it right? What are you looking at? Kinzu raised his eyebrows and said with a smirk, "Who told you to eat so much at noon? Go take a walk to digest it." "I don't," Kinru refused without a second thought. "What a joke. Let her go to the deck with those 2 little brats. There's a strong sea breeze up there. Rejection is invalid." Glancing at this guy with a sidelong glance, Kinzu spread his hands helplessly. "If you don't want to become a little fat girl in the future, you'd better go out and exercise. When it comes to dealing with girls, this trick is more effective than anything else." Hearing that she might gain weight, the little girl stood up and walked out without thinking. However, as she walked, the girl was actually muttering, "It's all your fault, bad brother. You made so many delicious foods that I couldn't control my mouth without realizing it." Listening to the voice coming from far away, Kinzu couldn't help but have a few black lines on his forehead, and he muttered angrily, "This damn girl, she actually dared to say that to me. I won't give her any delicious food tonight." Pucci. Zhu Mengyo, who was sitting on the side, couldn't help laughing when she heard the words. After rolling her charming eyes at him, she smiled and asked, "When are we going back? Do we have to spend the night on the sea?" No, we'll go back soon." Hearing the question from the beautiful Zhu, Kinzu shook his head violently. Now thinking about the previous plan, he couldn't help but smile bigly. "I was thinking about spending a night on the sea and taking them to see the sunrise. As a result, when we came to the sea, feeling the biting sea breeze and the temperature which was much lower than on land, I thought it was better to forget it. Otherwise, I won't see the sunrise and catch it cold. Since we are not spending the night here, we have to speed up." Raising her wrist to check the time, the beautiful Zhu suggested with a chuckle, "Well, I'll have them prepare to cast the nets." Nodding, Kinzu stood up and walked out. "We'll get ready to anchor." Arriving in the cab, Kinzu looked at Ru, who was smoking a cigarette, and said with a smile, "Let's cast a few nets and go back. This weather is really unbearable." "Okay, boss." Will agreed, extinguished the cigarette in his hand, picked up the walkie-talkie and ordered, "Simon, raise anchor and set sail." "Got it." After Simon's excited response came from the walkie-talkie, Will put down the walkie-talkie and said with a smile, "Boss, it's actually okay once you get used to it, and you won't feel how cold it is." "Really?" Kinzu smiled and shrugged. "Unfortunately, I think it will be hard for me to develop this habit." "Ha, that's right. Who would be willing to come out and suffer this if they have nothing to do now?" Will sighed with a smile and stopped talking. Instead, he turned on the fish finder to see where to cast the net. "Go this way, the fish catch here is very good." Kinzu smiled and ordered, pointing to a coordinate displayed on the fish finder. He had been paying attention to where and what kind of fish there were in the nearby sea area. Not only was cheese used as a laborer, but even silver light was brought here by him. There was no other way. For the sake of those high-end seafood, he had to choose to exploit them both temporarily. After all, if it was just a matter of luck, I don't know how many nets I would have to cast before I could catch those precious seafood. And with the help of 2 guys, it would be different. When the fishing net came down, the 2 of them would drive the fish into the fishing net one after another under Kinzu's orders. Thinking about the efficiency, Kinzu couldn't help but give himself a few thumbs up. As the captain, Will had no resistance to Kinzu's orders, and he did as he was told. He even hoped that Kinzu would be in charge every time he went out to sea. In that case, the catch would definitely be a good harvest every time. Because he knew very well that Kinzu could detect in advance where there were schools of fish and what kind of fish they were. After all, as the only great druid in the world, if he didn't have some skills, he would look down on him, right? Chapter 807 Closing the Net. A loud and clear whistle broke the silence on the endless sea, and also made several people on the fishing boat a little excited. Qinwan and Li Jianhua were full of curiosity about fishing at sea, and they wanted to watch it up close. Qinru brought Tongton, Lily and 2 little huskies because they didn't have to continue running. In just half an hour, these guys were exhausted. Qin's father and mother were purely because of their attachment to land. After the initial novelty period, the 2 old people missed the vast ranch very much. Although they also knew that the sea here and the ranch belonged to them at first glance. However, compared with the land, they were full of unknown fear about the sea. After all, sailing on the sea does not have the down-to-earth feeling of land. In the bedroom on the 2nd floor, Qinzu was hugging the beautiful Zhu at this moment, lying on the soft big bed with his eyes closed. Ahem, this is true, Qinzu is really resting his mind with his eyes closed. Because the fishing net had been thrown down at this moment, he had to command the 2 guys to drive the fish that had been targeted for a long time into the fishing net. At this moment, a faint sound of footsteps came, causing Qinzu, who was resting with his eyes closed, to quickly retract his salty pig hand. Ahem, he was really resting with his eyes closed, and that hand was just an accident. Well, that's it. Uncle, we're back from running. Accompanied by a slightly childish voice, the 2 little guys, Tongton and Lily, each holding a little husky in a somewhat listless state, pushed the door and walked in. Back? Didn't you slack off? Qinzu asked with a smile, sitting up from the bed. However, Tongton looked at her uncle with a strange look, always feeling that his facial expression seemed a little abnormal. Of course, if Qinzu knew what this girl was thinking, he would definitely be very sad. If you can keep your face calm when someone pinches the soft flesh around your waist, then he will really admire you to death. Uncle, look at them, they seem to be sick. Throwing aside the strange thoughts in her head, Tongton pointed at the listless little husky in front of her. Yes. Lily was not as careful as Tongton. He ignored the little husky's struggle and pulled it over, asking anxiously. No, you little brat, you can't toss it like this. Reaching out to take the ropes from the 2 little guys, Qinzu smiled bitterly and freed the 2 listless little huskies. Woof 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 woof. As soon as they regained their freedom, the 2 idiots seemed to have changed and shouted excitedly. While shouting, they ran outside, as if they were afraid that Qinzu would bring that damn thing to them again. Looking at the 2 lively little huskies, Tongton and Lily were both at a loss. With their little brains, they really couldn't figure out why they were so different before and after. Okay, let's go out. It's time to collect the nets. Qinzu rubbed his old waist, grabbed the naughty little hand, and pulled the beautiful Zhu out of the room. HMPH, let's see if you'll be dishonest again in the future. Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at the guy, thinking about the situation just now. It was really thrilling. Almost, she was hit by the 2 little guys. Qinzu just laughed a few times for the complaint of the beautiful Zhu, and didn't take it to heart at all. Anyway, he will do the same next time. When they got outside, Will just came out of the cab. Boss, the pressure is full, we can collect the nets. Well, then collect the nets. Qinzu nodded casually, and then shouted to the cabin with a smile. Dad, Mom, we're going to collect the nets, come out and watch the fun. So soon? Qin's father and mother ran out of the cabin quickly. They were also quite curious about fishing on the sea with fishing boats. In particular, Qin's father was holding a teacup in his hand. At this moment, he was sipping the hot tea while looking out to the sea. Just as he was about to make a few jokes, he was interrupted by Li Jianhua, who was joining in the fun. Xiao Zhu, how long have you been fishing? How come you closed the net so quickly? Li Jianhua looked at his brother-in-law with curiosity, wanting to hear his answer. Of course, he didn't think that Qinzu didn't know how to fish, he just wanted to ask if there were any tricks. After all, ordinary fishing boats have to stay in the sea for a long time before retrieving the net. Ha, brother-in-law, when the net is full of fish, we naturally have to close the net. How could Qinzu tell him any tricks? Pointing to the pressure gauge on the side, he smiled and said, Look, this represents whether there are fish in the fishing net. The greater the pressure, the more fish there are in the fishing net. With more fish, it is natural to close the net. Oh, that's how it is. Li Jianhua, who was completely an outsider, listened to Qinzu's explanation and nodded as if he had suddenly realized something, with a look of approval on his face. Seeing this, Qinzu's mouth twitched slightly, and he thought, If there is no cheat to help, even if you drive a fishing boat around the sea for a day, you may get nothing if you're unlucky. However, he didn't need to explain all this to Li Jianhua. After all, he couldn't stay here to help him fish. Of course, even if he wanted to stay, Qinzhou didn't dare to ask him to stay. Anyway, he was bored now, so Qinzhou simply chatted with him. From fishing in the fishery, to herding cattle on the ranch, to taking a plane to attend a cocktail party. Anyway, the two of them could talk about a few things along the way. Just when Qinzhou was chatting enthusiastically, he suddenly found that Li Jianhua's eyes suddenly became blank. How to say it? It was as if he suddenly saw several peerless beauties slowly undressing in front of him, wanting to dedicate themselves to him. Brother-in-law, what's wrong? Qinzhou couldn't help but waved his hand and asked with some concern. Ah? Li Jianhua was stunned, then reacted, pointed to the back, and shouted excitedly. It's coming, it's coming. What's coming? Qinzhou was stunned, a little puzzled by his excited look, and then turned his head to look back. It turned out that under the pull of the winch, the fishing net full of harvest had gradually floated to the surface of the water. And the touch of white scenery, under the sunlight, was so golden and dazzling. Just like the peach blossoms in March, even from a distance, it can firmly attract people's eyes. Hey, boss, it seems that the harvest this time is very considerable. After wiping his hands, Will stood up and walked towards the cab. When he passed Qinzhou, he smiled and congratulated him. Chapter 808 Li Jianhua's heartbeat accelerates. Of course, I think so too. Qinzhou smiled, but his eyes were fixed on the fishing net that was getting closer and closer. This time was different from the past. He only ordered the two little guys to drive the fish, but he didn't supervise. So, he was also looking forward to it now. Here it comes. With Simon's shout, the fishing net was slowly pulled up by the winch. When Qin's father and mother saw the huge fish ball in front of them, they were shocked and speechless. After a long time, the little girl talked and broke the silence. Wow, uncle, look, there are so many fish. The little girl lying in Qin's arms pointed at the fish ball made of countless sea fish in front of her with her white and tender little hands, and cheered excitedly. Yes, this is too much. Qin casually agreed with her daughter, but her arms couldn't help but tighten to prevent the little girl from falling down due to excessive excitement. Qin's mother's perspective on things was a little different from that of others. After the initial shock, she couldn't help but look at Qinzhou and asked, Xiaozu, this net will probably make tens of thousands, right? Qinzhou was really stunned by his mother's question, and subconsciously replied, about the same, it should be able to sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. My goodness, this net is worth hundreds of thousands, or dollars? Yes, yes. Qinzhou scratched his head and admitted it. Hearing this, Qin's mother couldn't help but focus on her son and looked him up and down. Although she had known that her son was good at making money, she still couldn't accept it when she saw that he made hundreds of thousands of dollars in such a short time. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, converted into RMB, is more than 1 million, right? Thinking of this, Qin's mother couldn't help but sigh. No wonder people say fishing is profitable. Li Jianhua smacked his lips and felt his throat was a little dry. He agreed with Qin's mother's words 1000%. Now he was thinking about whether he should stay in the United States and hang out with his brother-in-law. 1 million per net, if you cast 10 nets a day, that would be 10 million, right? The more he thought about it, the more rapidly Jianhua's breathing became. At this moment, he wished he could buy a boat and go fishing with them. Qinzhou took in the expressions of the others, and couldn't help but smile bigly. Looking at his mother's excited eyes, he asked, Mom, do you know how much fuel we use for this trip? Mother Qin was stunned for a moment, but she still asked subconsciously. How much? Nearly $10,000 worth of fuel. Qinzhou raised a finger and said in a decisive tone, just a simple trip to the sea, without doing anything, will consume $10,000 worth of fuel for one round trip. So much. Mother Qin was a little skeptical. How much gasoline can you buy with $10,000? Yeah, shucks you, do fishing boats consume so much fuel? Li Jianhua was also a little unconvinced. If a car uses more than $10,000 worth of gasoline, it would be no problem to run 10 trips, not to mention one. Why would I lie to you? Qinzhou curled his lips and reached out to take out a gas receipt from his pocket. Hey, brother-in-law, you know English, take a look. In fact, you don't need to understand English, because the string of Arabic numerals on the receipt is very conspicuous. Li Jianhua also recognized the symbol after 12,832, which is the US dollar. That's not bad. After hesitating for a while, Li Jianhua really suppressed his restless heart and asked, even if it costs $10,000 per trip, can't you still make a net profit of more than $100,000? How is it possible? Qin Zhu rolled his eyes and asked back, don't you have to pay the employees' salaries? Don't you have to calculate the loss of the fishing boat? Don't you have to pay the taxes you should pay? The taxes in the United States are very heavy. Several people looked at each other and looked at each other. And this is not the most important thing. Seeing that several people were lost in thought, Qin Zhu was still a little unwilling to give up. What else? Seeing that Qin Zhu said something and stopped again, Li Jianhua couldn't help but ask a question. And? Qin Zhu raised a curved arc at the corner of his mouth and asked with a smile, can you get a good harvest every time you cast a net? This time they were no longer stunned, but several people were a little dumbfounded. They realized that fishing is not only a technical job, it also depends on luck. Think about it, if every net can make so much money, then there would be fishing boats floating everywhere on the sea now. It would have been better if Qin Zhu didn't say it. When he said this, Li Jianhua immediately thought of a question and asked hurriedly, then how can you have such a good harvest here? Is there any trick? What trick? Faced with such a question, Qin Zhu could only spread his hands. Brother-in-law, before I took over this fishery, no one had fished in this sea area for many years. At this point, Li Jianhua was completely desperate. He sighed helplessly, muttering to himself, it seems that it's not easy to do any job. Qin Zhu heard it clearly and couldn't help but smile and said, brother-in-law, you just need to run the restaurant well at home, and you will be responsible for the domestic business. Let's try to open restaurants all over China. Qin Zhu said it very excitedly, but Li Jianhua's face was a little dull. Gong. He swallowed hard, laughed twice, and asked uncertainly, Xiao Zhu, you just said that we should open restaurants all over China. Yes, I am very confident. Qin Zhu answered very straightforwardly. In his opinion, this goal will be achieved sooner or later. I'll wait and see. Li Jianhua laughed and pointed to the sea fish pouring into the fish tank not far away, and quickly changed the subject. By the way, Xiao Zhu, don't you need help over there? Hearing what Li Jianhua said, Qin Zhu remembered that he seemed to have some work to do here. Of course I have to help, it's too cold. Touching his nose, Qin Zhu looked up at Li Jianhua and said with a smile, brother-in-law, come, you and Dad, let's go help them to finish the work quickly and go back. As he said, Qin Zhu took the two of them, put on a set of work clothes similar to raincoats, put on a pair of warm leather gloves, and quickly ran to the fish tank. However, Qin's father and Li Jianhua were both doing this kind of work for the first time, and they were a little confused when they arrived. Fortunately, there was a ready-made teacher who squatted on the side to teach, and the two of them made rapid progress. Yes, Dad, that's the red snapper, just put it over there. Well, brother-in-law, yours is the green snapper, put it over there. Well, yours is the dragon pump, a very good fish, just put it here. Chapter 809 has hit bottom. With the addition of Qin Zhu and others, the sorting speed was much faster. It used to take more than 2 hours, but now it was completed by a few people in more than an hour. However, the price was also quite heavy. Well, Qin's father and Li Jianhua both rubbed their arms, obviously very tired. Brother-in-law, your physical condition is still not good, you need to exercise more. After wiping his hands, Qin Zhu laughed and teased Li Jianhua. Go, do you think everyone is as perverted as you? Although he scolded them for being perverted, Li Jianhua looked at the energetic Qin Zhu and Simon and others, and envied them in his heart. He was not much older than Qin Zhu, but his physical condition was completely crushed compared to his brother-in-law. He walked out of the cabin with a smile, but he happened to meet 2 pairs of resentful eyes. Bad uncle or father, you didn't even take us in. Tongton and Lily pouted their little mouths, stood beside their mother and grandmother, and looked at them with unhappy faces. Don't look at me, Qin Zhu raised his hands first, and before Li Jianhua could react, he quickly said, little guys, I really want to take you in, but your dad doesn't want to, you go find him. Hey, Li Jianhua, who was standing aside, stared at his brother-in-law in amazement. How could he be so shameless? He was obviously in a hurry and thought that the 2 little guys coming in would delay things, but now it's his fault. But who is Qin Zhu? How could he give him a chance to argue? Before he could say anything, he squatted down with a smile. Tongton, Lily, Uncle will take you in later. Let's ignore the bad dad, okay? In Li Jianhua's eyes that wanted to cry but had no tears, the two little guys nodded their heads heavily. Okay, let's ignore him. Qin Zhu heard this, winked at his mother and sister proudly, and then ran away. As for how Li Jianhua behind him coaxed his daughter, he was not interested in caring. Coming to the cab, looking at Will who was leisurely crossing his legs, Qin Zhu asked with a smile. How is it, did you find anything? Of course, Will shrugged. No. Qin Zhu was a little embarrassed and looked at him in surprise. When did this guy start to joke? Ha ha, boss, don't blame me, it's because the work here is too easy. Taking out a bottle of red wine from the wine cabinet next to him, Will poured a glass for each of them. After clinking glasses with Qin Zhu, he shook the glass and said, being a captain here is really easier than anywhere else. There is nothing to worry about. Really? Qin Zhu picked up the glass and took a sip, smiling and teasing. If you can't make me a big harvest later, I will deduct your bonus. Will you? Will looked at Qin Zhu with a smile, and that expression seemed to confirm that Qin Zhu would not be ordinary. Sure enough, Qin Zhu shook his head helplessly. Of course I won't. After all, no one can resist money. That's good. Will raised his glass and gestured to Qin Zhu. Come on, let's drink a toast for our common opinion. Qin Zhu readily agreed. Cheers. After drinking the scarlet liquid in the goblet, Qin Zhu put the glass aside and pointed to a position on the fish finder. Start the boat, drop the net here, and go this way. Qin Zhu drew a straight line down along the fish finder and smiled at Will who was still holding the glass. Is it okay? Will waved his hand and said with a positive tone, this is absolutely okay. Qin Zhu had no doubt about this. After Simon packed up the fishing net, Qin Zhu gave an order to pull up the anchor and set sail. At this time, the sky had become a little dark, but the visibility was still quite good. After arriving at the designated location, Will told Simon to cast the net without waiting for Qin Zhu's order. The fishing net was put into the water, and the cheese and silver light, who had been waiting for a long time, took action again. This giant python and devil once again set off a wave in this sea area. However, this time, the luck seemed a little bad. Boss, there is a problem. Will's voice rang in Qin Zhu's ears through the intercom. Qin Zhu, who was preparing dinner, called the beautiful Zhu who was watching him grilling meat, and handed the barbecue in his hand to her with a smile. Baby, you take it first, I'll go over there to take a look. Zhu Mengyi also heard Will's call, so she nodded very obediently, and did not forget to whisper. Then you should pay attention, button up your collar, don't catch it cold. Qin Zhu leaned over, gently touched her tempting pink lips, and smiled and said, okay, I know, little housekeeper. As he said that, he ran quickly towards the cab in her shy eyes. When he ran to the cab, he could also clearly feel that the speed of the boat had slowed down. Will, what's going on? Did you slow down? No, I didn't. Will waved his hands repeatedly, and then pointed to the pressure gauge next to him. Boss, look at this. This is, looking at the pressure gauge, Qin Zhu frowned slightly, because the pressure on it was almost full. And now, the fishing net has just been put into the water, it is impossible to have such a great pressure. Hit the bottom? Will nodded, and said with some embarrassment, I guess it hit the bottom, it's very troublesome. Although the two have been talking, Will's hands have not stopped. At this time, he has stopped the fishing boat. Boss, I'll go down and take a look. Simon said as he walked in from outside. As an experienced old fisherman, he has found all the diving equipment and is putting it on. No, don't put it on. Qin Zhu waved his hand, indicating Simon not to worry. Going to the sea in this weather, even if he has a strong body of more than 1.9 meters tall, he will probably catch it cold. Especially now that the sun is about to set, the temperature of the seabed is extremely cold. How could Qin Zhu let him go to the sea at this time? But, this won't work. Stopping what he was doing, Simon looked at Qin Zhu with some embarrassment, but he was very moved in his heart. Because according to experience, there are generally two ways after hitting the bottom. One is to send someone down to take the fishing net away from the reef. The other is to directly abandon the fishing net. However, the fishing nets on the fishing boats are not cheap, and few captains are willing to throw away the fishing nets. Qin Zhu obviously understood this truth very well. He smiled and said, it's just a fishing net. If it's gone, you can buy another one. Even an Iron Man can't stand going to the sea in this damn weather. But before he finished speaking, his body shook violently and he almost fell to the ground. What's going on? Why is the boat shaking? Chapter 810. Meet Mantis Shrimp again. Before Kinzu finished speaking, he felt that the fishing boat that had already stopped seemed to be slowly retreating. Will, who was standing by, was not panicked at this time, but licked his lips excitedly. Boss, maybe we met a big guy below. Huh? Kinzu was stunned when he heard this, and raised his head in disbelief. You mean, the fishing boat is being dragged by the guy below? That should be right. After saying this, Will did not stop the action of his hands. With a sudden shock of the boat body, the fishing boat started again. However, as the fishing boat started, the pressure gauge on one side suddenly began to emit a beep, beep alarm sound. It seems that there is some trouble. The excitement on Will's face gradually faded, and his expression became a little worried. Because the crisp alarm sound kept reminding him that the fishing net was about to be unable to bear it. Kinzu obviously understood this. He hesitated for a moment, and reached out to pat Will on the shoulder. Hold on, man. Give me 10 minutes. Okay, Will agreed straightforwardly, but he still reminded. Boss, you need to move faster. I'm afraid it will damage the fishing net. Don't worry. After saying this, Kinzu turned and walked out of the cab and went to the bedroom on the second floor of the cabin. Will, what is the boss doing? When Kinzu left, Simon, who was standing aside, was a little confused. At this time, should he make a decision, the boat or the fishing net? Don't worry, Simon. Will reached out and patted his apprentice on the shoulder, reminding him vaguely. You know, our boss is not such a simple person. Really? Looking at Kinzu's back that gradually disappeared from his sight, Simon nodded thoughtfully. Then I know, I will pay attention next time. Kinzu didn't know what the two people behind him were talking about him. After returning to the bedroom, he ignored the little guy who was pestering him. Instead, he closed his eyes and turned his thoughts to cheese. On the dark seabed, a 9-meter-long golden sea python, whose eyes, originally full of indifference, suddenly became more lively. What is this? Kinzu opened his eyes and was stunned for a long time before gradually adapting to his new body. He twisted his sturdy python body, slowly raised his head from the bottom of the sea, and began to patrol around. Fortunately, he was not far from the fishing net and easily found a trace of the fishing net. However, after seeing this, Kinzu was stunned and could not speak for a long time. Well, he is now in the body of a python, so he can't speak. However, just looking at how wide his mouth is now, you will understand how surprised he is now. Because there are indeed a lot of things in the fishing net. But to his surprise, he didn't see any of the big guys he expected. Impossible. Kinzu, who was a little unconvinced, twisted his huge body as thick as a water bucket and moved forward for a distance, wanting to see more clearly. This time, Kinzu could really see the situation in the fishing net. There were indeed no big fish. Especially the sharks, whales, or big tuna that he had expected, none of them. But the things that appeared in it made Kinzu a little confused. Yes, Kinzu couldn't understand it. Because the net bag was full of lobsters. That's not right. Looking at the creatures that looked like lobsters in the net bag, Kinzu's huge pupils couldn't help but flash a few traces of doubt. These guys are different from lobsters. Their appearance is very bright, composed of red, blue, green and other colors. However, the scales of their tentacles are orange-red, and the outer edges at the end are black. The front side edge of the cephalothorax has black and coffee honeycomb patterns with white edges. Isn't this a mantis shrimp? After recognizing the identity of those lobsters, Kinzu's pupils, which were already large, widened even more. Because he caught this thing last time and was very interested in their attack power, Kinzu made a special effort to learn about them. As far as he knew, the largest mantis shrimp could only grow to 17 or 18 centimeters. But now, at a glance, none of these guys are less than 30 centimeters. My goodness, with this size, will the ribs be broken if a hammer hits them? Looking at the mantis shrimps waving their claws wildly in the fishing net, Kinzu was amazed. Fortunately, these guys love to hammer people and have strong explosive power, but their claws are not very sharp. Therefore, although they can drive the fishing boat backwards with their combined strength, they will not damage the fishing net. However, it is not a good idea to let them toss like this. Kinzu pondered for a moment, twisted his sturdy body, circled around the fishing net, and came to the opposite direction of their advance, then stopped. Hey, little guys, today brother will teach you how to be a human, oh no, how to be a shrimp. After moving his body, Kinzu roared a few times with that weird hissing sound, raised his tail and went towards the fishing net. Bang! A loud noise sounded silently at the bottom of the sea, shaking the surrounding seawater, and it also surged. Qin put away his trembling tail and cursed fiercely in his heart. It hurts so much. Even though he is now thick-skinned, he now feels that his tail seems to be broken. The blow against those guys just now gave Qin the feeling that it was like whipping on steel. Although it can leave some marks, the rebound he suffered is more serious. Fortunately, although he failed to shake the heavy fishing net, he also caused great damage to your mantis shrimps. At least, the layer that was attached to the fishing net had become a bloody mess. Alas, this is all money. With a sigh, Qin dragged his weak body to the side and hid, then he regained consciousness. When Qin came out of the bedroom and came to the cab, he found that Will's expression had returned to a relaxed state. Because the pressure on the pressure gauge had just dropped by half. He thought that the boss must have solved the problem. I'm really looking forward to it. What kind of big guy will be down there? While muttering to himself, Will heard Qin's somewhat anxious voice. Hurry up, Will, close the net quickly, you must be quick. What? Will was a little confused. Wasn't it already solved? But Qin didn't mean to explain to him, but continued to urge. Don't ask so many questions, close the net quickly, you'll know in a while. Chapter 811 Pipe of Shrimp, let's go find A. Yes, Will soon found out the reason. When the net of mantis shrimps, which was still alive and kicking, was slowly pulled onto the fishing boat by the winch, his eyes almost popped out. Oh, God, this is incredible. Will didn't care about the water still flowing in the fishing net, and rushed over directly, staring blankly, and exclaimed. Now, several people on the boat were attracted. Shouts you, what's wrong with this ghost, this guy? Shouting. When Qin's father opened his mouth, he wanted to call him the ghost, but when the words came to his lips, he changed it to that guy. After all, we have to be polite, right? Who knows? Qin shrugged, raised the corner of his mouth, and said with a hint of sarcasm. Maybe he was a little surprised to see such a big lobster. Really? Qin's father turned his head doubtfully, and saw so many lobsters in the fishing net, and couldn't help but exclaimed. Ah, such a big lobster. As he said that, he took a few steps forward, and it seemed that he wanted to get close to it. No, Dad, don't go over there. Qin stopped his father who wanted to go over there, and said to the curious people on the side. Mom, sister, brother-in-law, you must not get close to the front, this kind of shrimp is very powerful. Shrimp is powerful? How powerful can it be? Qin's father looked at Qin with some suspicion, obviously not believing his son's words. Shrugging his shoulders, Qin replied lightly. Just its pair of big claws can break a person's bones in one go, don't you think it's powerful? Yes, everyone took a breath of cold air when they heard it, and the younger sister Qinru hurriedly stepped back a few steps, as if only in this way could she avoid being hit by the terrible big claws. Qin chuckled twice, and under the threat of Qinru's raised fist, he turned his head and walked towards Will. How is it? This catch is pretty good, right? When Qin got closer, he stood next to Will and asked with a smile as he watched the huge mantis shrimps being poured into the fish hold. Great, really great. Will gave Qin a thumbs up and said with admiration. I can't believe there are mantis shrimps of this size in the world. Yeah. Qin also nodded and said with a smile. If it hits a person, it will probably be seriously injured if not dead. Indeed. Will agreed very much. Looking at the mantis shrimps in front of him that were still alive and kicking, he said with a wry smile. It seems that we are in trouble now. This. Qin shrugged. Will, I believe you can do it. Okay, Will spread his hands. Boss, is this a compliment? No, no. Qin waved his hands repeatedly, rubbed his thumb and index finger together, and said with a smirk. This is a compliment. I'll give you a bonus when we go back this time. Oh, God. Will's face suddenly broke into a bright smile. Boss, I suddenly feel that you are the best boss in the world. Ha ha, I've always thought so. Qin smiled and hugged Will, then turned around and took a few people back to the deck to continue their dinner. As for the matter over there, just as Qin said, he believed that Will could handle it. After all, he didn't spend so much money to ask them to be masters. If he didn't let them do this dangerous thing, would he and his father do it? Shouts you, what kind of shrimp is that? Why is it so fierce? At this time, Qin's father and others also completely believed Qin's words. Because from the expressions and movements of those foreigners, they knew that this thing must be dangerous. Moreover, the sound of the big claws knocking on the deck alone was enough for them to estimate the strength. Now, when they look at those lobsters, they all have a taste of avoiding them. Mantis shrimp. Qin Zhu took the grilled fish from the beautiful Zhu and said with a smile, "Maybe you haven't heard of this name. Have you heard of the mantis shrimp?" "I have heard of it, I have heard of it." Before Qin's father and others could answer, the little girl Tomten raised her little hand and answered first. Moreover, while she was talking, the little girl started to sing. "Pipixia, let's go find a blue friend, eat fried chicken and drink beer, and hold hands together." Seeing the intoxicated expression of the little girl, Qin Zhu and others couldn't help but have a few black lines on their foreheads. Qin Wan was even more amused, and slapped her daughter on the back. "Silly girl, what a mess, who taught you this?" The little girl was a little unhappy when her mother interrupted her singing, and she pouted and muttered, "My aunt taught me." "What?" Qin Ru jumped up immediately, shouting with an aggrieved look, "Little girl, what are you talking about? When did I teach you this?" "In the past." The little girl ignored the threatening look of her aunt and said with certainty, "You sang at home before, and asked me to sing along." "Ah, was there?" Qin Ru scratched her head in confusion. She wanted to deny it immediately. However, looking at the little girl's short face, she herself was a little confused. Did she really teach her this song? Although she did hum this song at home, did she really teach the little girl? However, all this is not important now. Before she could figure it out, her mother slapped her on the back of the head. "You dead girl, look at you, what do you teach them every day?" "I didn't teach you." The little sister felt very aggrieved. She really couldn't remember that she had taught this guy. Okay, where were we talking about just now?" Qin Zhu hurriedly waved his hand to interrupt the conversation between the few people, and the topic was brought back to the mantis shrimp. "We were talking about mantis shrimp just now." The little sister also cooperated to change the topic. However, she still had some doubts in her heart. Did she really teach those two little ghosts to sing this song? Yes, it's the mantis shrimp." Qin Zhu nodded and said with a smile, "The mantis shrimp in the song is actually the mantis shrimp we just caught." "Ah, really?" Qin Ru's eyes widened immediately, and she didn't even care about her own thoughts. She sat up straight and looked at Qin Zhu with some curiosity, and asked impatiently, "Brother, is the mantis shrimp in the song really this mantis shrimp?" "Of course it's true, would I lie to you?" As he said that, Qin Zhu smiled and took out a walkie-talkie from his arms. After turning it on, he directly ordered, "Will, bring 2 dead mantis shrimps over, we'll have an extra meal tonight." Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 812 Return. In the vast night, the breeze blew gently. A huge ship emitting colorful light was riding the wind and waves, sailing quickly in the vast ocean. On the side of the huge ship, there was a bold character flashing with colorful light, reminding everyone that this was a fishing boat belonging to the Tycoon manor. "Oh, it's really full." Qin Ru, wearing a large white down jacket, stroking her belly with one hand, leaned on the side of the ship, and her small figure looked a little bloated. Qin Zhu, who was standing aside, turned his head and looked up and down with a smile, and then said, "Who told you to eat so much, little girl? Be careful not to get fat and not get married in the future." "Humph, I can't get fat." After Qin Zhu said this, although Qin Ru was still very stubborn, the little girl's expression was clearly worried. Moreover, the little hands pinched her belly, as if she was really worried that she had gained weight. Poochie. Seeing her sister-in-law so cute, the beautiful Zhu couldn't help laughing out loud. Letting go of Qin Zhu's big hand, Zhu Mengyo came to the unhappy sister-in-law and pinched her small face with a smile. "You, don't listen to your brother's nonsense. Aurora is so cute, how can she not get married?" "That's right, sister-in-law is still good." Qin Ru wrinkled her nose proudly, made a face at her brother, and ignored this back brother. Ha ha. Seeing Zhu Mengyu and Qin Ru chatting happily over there, Qin Zhu's smile was also particularly bright. He was wearing a black suit, leaning on the side of the boat, just watching them quietly, and a few traces of happiness rose in his heart. Every morning, he can eat breakfast made by his mother, every day, he can bicker with the little girl, and every night, he can hug the fragrant body of the beautiful Zhu to sleep. Qin Zhu felt very happy to have a family together. He even thought, how nice it would be if time could stay at this moment forever. Woof 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 as if deliberately against Kinzu. When Kinzu was lost in thought, two little guys suddenly appeared beside him. What's wrong? Looking at the excited little husky barking and jumping around at his feet, Kinzu, who had come to his senses, was a little confused. Ha ha, boss, this is because we are almost at the manor. A hearty laugh sounded from behind Kinzu. Turning around, it turned out that Simon was holding a rope in his hand and striding towards this side. Oh, so fast? Kinzu turned his head again in surprise, and then he realized that it was really close to the shore. How is it? Have you dealt with those troublesome guys? Of course. Simon waved his arms and said proudly, this little thing is really nothing to the great Simon. Hilly. Kinzu gave him an insincere smile in return. Okay, boss. Simon was embarrassed by Kinzu's half smile, shrugged his shoulders, and said with a wry smile, I admit that those guys are really difficult to deal with, but we still dealt with them all. That's good. Seeing that the boat was about to approach the dock, Kinzu greeted the two people next to him, then patted Simon on the shoulder and said with a smile, Dude, you did a great job. Go back and tell everyone that everyone will get 3 more weeks of salary this week. Oh, God. Simon exclaimed when he heard it, and said with a little excitement, Boss, I found that you are the cutest boss in the world. Really? Kinzu spread his hands helplessly, I think so too. Looking at Kinzu who left with a big laugh, Simon's stiff expression softened. However, thinking about what his boss had just said, Simon couldn't help scratching his head, a little confused. Strange, isn't it said that Oriental people are very modest? When the fishing boat successfully docked at the dock, Kinzu and his friends hadn't gotten off yet, but the two little huskies couldn't wait to jump off. At this time, they no longer had the excitement they had this morning. Back then, because they could get on the boat, they were very arrogant and showed off to Betty for a long time. But after a day of bumps and being ravaged, the big husky now just wants to say, Brother, if you can do it, you go. Uncle, hurry up, they all ran away. The two little huskies had just run a short distance when they heard a familiar voice from behind. They paused and then became faster. Ha ha, Shoutongton, are you too ugly? Look how scared you are. Seeing this funny scene, Kinru, the little girl who has not grown up, of course would not miss the opportunity to tease her little niece. Who made this little girl say that she taught her to sing? Kinru thought about this for a long time afterwards, and she was basically certain that she had never taught the little girl. At most, they accidentally heard her when she was listening. It was really accidental. Although this is not much different from teaching, she did not take the initiative to teach. Therefore, Kinru was still very happy to tease this dead girl. Humph, no. Hearing her aunt's teasing, the little girl snorted, but did not dare to vent her anger on her, but chose Lei who was sleepy beside her. It's all Lei who scared him. He is too ugly and not as cute as Tong Tong. What? Lady, who was dozing off, raised his head in a daze when he heard someone mention him. Nothing, you continue to sleep. Tong Tong, who was nestled in her mother's arms, hurriedly changed the topic after hearing this, and even stretched out her little hand to pat Lei's back who was sleeping on King's mother's shoulder. She didn't want to offend Lei as well. After all, she couldn't beat him. Oh, then I'll go back to sleep. Lady, who had no idea that he had been betrayed, agreed in a daze and fell asleep. You're such a smart kid. Kinru took the lead and walked off the fishing boat after she stretched out her finger and gently tapped Tong Tong's little head. Kinzu watched them get off the boat, and when they all got off, he turned around and shouted to Simon. Simon, take good care of those lobsters for me, don't kill them. Of course. Simon stopped what he was doing and promised with a smile. Boss, don't worry, I promise that these guys will still be alive and kicking tomorrow. That's good. Kinzu nodded, then smiled and waved to everyone, and strode towards the villa. When Kinzu's figure gradually disappeared, Simon turned around and clapped his hands at Will and the others who were busy cleaning up. Hey guys, stop for a moment. What's wrong? Will stopped what he was doing, stood up, wiped his hands, took out a cigarette from his jacket pocket, lit it, and took a deep puff. If you have anything to say, tell me quickly, finish it as soon as possible and go back to bed as soon as possible. Hearing this, Simon no longer kept it a secret, and laughed and said loudly, I have good news to tell you all. The boss just told me that everyone can get 3 more weeks of salary this week. Wow. This is great, boss, I love you so much. Ha ha, Hubbard, are you confessing your love? Be careful or you will duel with you. Damn, I'm not gay, I'm thanking the boss, thank you, understand? Chapter 813 Milking. When the morning sun shines through the French windows and spreads on the soft big bed, the curled figure on the big bed wakes up from sleep, blinks his long eyelashes, and slowly opens his eyes. What time is it? The little hand subconsciously touches the side, and Kinru sits up quickly, wanting to see if she is late. But when the little hand touches nothing, the confused little girl comes back to her senses. Oh, I forgot, I'm on vacation. After hammering her little head, Kinru's still confused little face blooms with an extremely bright smile. I'm on vacation and don't have to go to school. Moreover, I'm in the United States now. When school starts again, I couldn't go to school here. Pouting her little mouth, the little girl half leans on the head of the bed, thinking of the beautiful life in the future, and her big black and bright eyes are suddenly filled with happiness. But, for all this, I really have to thank my bag brother. Thinking of the brother who loves to quarrel with her but cares about her very much, Kinru's little face showed a few entanglements again. Really, sometimes, she wanted to pounce on her brother and bite him a few times. But sometimes, she was spoiled by him. Oh, he is really an elusive bad brother. With a sigh, the little girl raised her little head and looked at the decoration in the room curiously. She has been in the United States for several days, but every time she sees her bedroom, she feels unreal. Well, 1 word, big. 2 words, very big. 3 words. What is that? 3 words can't describe it. Looking down at the big soft bed where she sleeps, this big bed alone is twice as big as her previous bed, right? After rolling on it twice, the little girl nodded very affirmatively. It must be twice as big. Dong dong dong. The sudden knock on the door made the little girl shudder all over. As if she was afraid that someone would suddenly come in and see her, she quickly pulled up a thin blanket and covered her petite body. Shaoru, are you up? Your brother is going to take you out to play this morning. When she heard the voice of her beautiful sister-in-law, the little girl finally felt relieved. After sorting out her flustered mood, she replied with a sweet voice and a smile. Sister Yaoyo, I'm up and will be out soon. Kinzu, who was sitting at the dining table downstairs and eating a bowl of noodles, saw Zumengyo coming down, and there was no familiar shadow behind her, so he smiled and said, Well, I told you that the lazy girl must not have gotten up yet. Who said that? The beautiful Zhu rolled her eyes at him and corrected him. Shaoru is not lazy, she got up a long time ago, okay? Really? Kinzu didn't quite believe it. Didn't his sister know it herself? Which Sunday when she was at home, could this girl get up before 10 o'clock? Of course it's true. Before Zumengyo could answer, she was interrupted by a voice. Kinzu looked up and looked at the figure that seemed to float down from the upstairs like a butterfly, and laughed and teased. Oh, what a miracle, why did the sun rise from the west today? Humph. Trisonda interrupted and raised her little head. Kinru decided not to talk back to her bad brother today. Mom, I'm hungry, is there anything to eat? Yes. Kin's mother smiled at her little daughter and just wanted to get up and go to the kitchen, but she saw Eva had already brought her breakfast. This time, it was not noodles. The little girl who was used to eating noodles at home had a different breakfast from others. Her favorite was the sandwiches and fried eggs with milk made by Eva. Of course, a hot dog would be even better. Thank you, Sister Eva. After showing a sweet smile to Eva, the little girl lowered her head and began to deal with the big meal in front of her. Well, her breakfast was not unique. For example, the 2 little ones learned bad habits from their aunt, refusing to eat noodles and insisting on eating the exquisite sandwiches. Moreover, even Qinwan and Li Jianhua occasionally eat 1 portion. Therefore, Eva, the Western chef, is not unemployed for the time being. And watching all this, Qin's mother smiled so brightly. After nodding at Eva, she turned her eyes full of happiness to her son and daughter-in-law. Since coming to the United States, Qin's mother has never stopped smiling, and it is always the kind of smile that is filled with happiness. Her son has made progress, his family is rich, and his future daughter-in-law is so beautiful. How can she not be happy? What makes her even happier is that her son has made progress, but he has not forgotten his family. Not to mention the house and car bought for his sister and brother-in-law, the restaurant alone is enough for his sister's family to eat for a lifetime. Now seeing the family living in harmony every day, Qin's mother is so happy. Perhaps, as the saying goes, material things are the basis of happiness. Although this sentence is not completely correct, it does make sense. How happy can a person who can't even have enough food and clothing live? Mom, where are you going to play later? Keen's mother, whose thoughts were wandering in space, was pulled back by Keen's words. Where to play? I don't know yet. Coming back to her senses, Keen's mother thought for a while, then shook her head helplessly. She really didn't know where to play. Because of her personality, she is not the kind of person who likes to go around. She likes to stay at home quietly doing housework, or go out and play mahjong with others when she has nothing to do. This kind of life is what she likes. Keen's was not too surprised when he saw this. The previous sentence was purely a polite greeting. Touching his chin, Keen's pondered for a while, and just when he was about to speak, his eyes accidentally glanced at the hot milk that Keen was drinking. Mom, let's go milk the cows today. Puff cough cough. Keen, who was drinking milk, thought her brother was teasing her again, and she was choked and coughed repeatedly. Brother, after finally stopping coughing, Keen took the tissue handed over by her mother and wiped the corner of her mouth, glaring at Keen with some resentment. What's wrong with me? Keen was glared at by the little girl, which showed that he was very confused. You see, Keen was still pretending to be stupid. Keen's face turned red with anger, and she pouted her little mouth, as if thinking about where to bite. Didn't I just say that everyone should go milk the cows later? Keen looked at the beautiful's with some grievance. He really didn't mean anything else. Puff. The beautiful's really couldn't help it. It was really fun to listen to the brother and sister chatting every day. Shaldra, your brother is talking about milking the cows. Chapter 814. No more milk? Go shoot. Even with the bright sunshine in the early morning of winter, it was still a little cold. Wrapping up his coat, Keen looked at the people behind him and decided to drive over. It would be a real hassle if the old and young caught a cold. When he brought his family to the milk factory, Old John seemed very surprised. Hey, boss, how come you have time to come here? After teasing Keen with a smile, Old John looked at Keen's father and mother behind Keen and sighed. Are these your parents? They are so young. Keen was a little embarrassed by Old John's teasing. It seemed that he, the owner of the manor, was really a little incompetent. However, when he heard his sigh, Keen still smiled and introduced them to the few people. Of course, he didn't need to translate, because Eva and Zumengyo, who were following the two elders, had already turned on the real-time translation mode. After the few people greeted each other, Keen touched his nose and then told them the purpose of his visit. But who would have thought that after listening to him, Old John looked at him with a particularly strange look. What's wrong, looking at me like that? Keen asked with a wry smile, twisting his body uncomfortably. Ahem. Old John coughed twice, and did not answer his question, but asked back. Boss, don't you know the operation mode of our dairy factory? Is there any mode? Keen looked at him with some doubt. What do you think? Scratching his head, Old John asked with some laughter. Boss, didn't you drink milk this morning? I did. Keen nodded, and then he reacted a little. You mean, those milks are all fresh milk of the day? What do you think? Shrugging his shoulders helplessly, Old John pointed to the cows that were mooing in the cowshed. Now there are more and more milk-producing cows, and the demand for supplying the ranch has long been more than enough. So, Old John spread his hands very simply. Boss, I told you last time that we have contacted a dairy farm in town. Every morning early, there will be their milk collection truck to take away today's milk. It seems, there was. Keen touched his nose awkwardly. He seemed to have this memory. So, the time for milking is around 6 o'clock every morning. As he said, Old John smiled at Keen. Boss, if you want to come and experience it, you can come and try it tomorrow morning. 6 o'clock. Keen shook his head quickly. Forget it. At this time, Keen's father and mother, with the translation of Eva and the beautiful ladies also knew the general situation. Of course, at this time, they also understood a lot about their son's responsibility. He didn't even know about his own ranch. Since he couldn't milk the cows, Keen didn't stay here for too long. After going to see the mutant cow growing up, the group returned to the villa. After getting off the car, Keen's mother looked at the vegetable garden not far away and said with a smile, If you want to go out and play, go ahead. I won't bother today. I'll go to the vegetable garden to take a look. As soon as she said this, she didn't expect that the first person to agree was Keen. Yes, I want to go to the vegetable garden to take a look too. Keen glanced at the girl with some confusion, wondering why the girl had changed her nature today. However, this is just right. Since the mother and the younger sister are free to move around, a lot of activities for men can be arranged. Turning his head to look at the beautiful Zhu next to him, before he could speak, Zhu Mengyo smiled and said, "Don't look at me, I'm going to help my aunt too." Qin Zhu laughed when he heard this, and his big mouth was more beautiful than anyone else. "That's perfect. You can take the two little guys with you, so that they don't get into any danger." Qin Zhu turned his head and looked at his father and Li Jianhua, who were eager to try. "Dad, brother-in-law, let's go. I'll teach you how to shoot a gun today." "Shoot a gun?" Qin Zhu's father and Li Jianhua were stunned when they heard what Qin Zhu said. They thought that the women were busy and they could go riding happily. Who knew that Qin Zhu would actually say to shoot a gun? No. Before Qin's father recovered from his surprise, he heard the strong objection from Qin's mother. "Why shoot a gun? Can you touch the thing easily? What if something goes wrong?" Qin Zhu covered his forehead speechlessly. How could he forget about his mother? "Well, Mom, this is very safe." After a somewhat weak argument, Qin Zhu couldn't say anything. "Yes, this thing is still very safe as long as it doesn't go off accidentally. It's not safe either. If the government captures you, it's a crime." Mother Qin talked for a long time, and finally warned, "You must not touch the thing." Mother Qin said it with great effort, but Qin Zhu felt something was wrong the more he listened. "Mom, this thing is legal in the United States." "What? Legal?" Mother Qin looked at him suspiciously. "Of course it is." Qin Zhu answered very straightforwardly. "Really?" Mother Qin's eyes drifted to Father Qin and Li Jianhua, wanting to hear what they had to say. But what could they say? Under the temptation of shooting, which men can hardly resist, the two who had already lost their position immediately nodded and agreed. Anyway, this is indeed the case, and they don't feel guilty about doing it. "Auntie, this is indeed true." After receiving Qin Zhu's eyes, the very helpless beauty Zhu glared at him and stood up to help explain. "Because there are more bad guys in the United States, every household has a gun, so people don't dare to mess around." "That's true." Qin's mother nodded thoughtfully, but she was still a little worried about several people playing with guns, and couldn't help but remind them, "You must be careful, after all, that thing doesn't have eyes." "Mom, don't worry." Qin Zhu put his arm around Qin's mother's shoulders and said with a grin, "With your son's level, how could I let them get into trouble?" Okay. Giving this guy a sidelong look in annoyance, Qin's mother muttered, "I know you are the best, okay, why don't you get over there quickly?" "Ha, Mom, I know you are the best." After proudly making an okay gesture to Qin's father and brother-in-law, Qin Zhu watched his mother and a few women walk towards the vegetable field. "Okay, Dad, let's go over and choose a gun." Chapter 815 Shooting Range. When Qin Zhu brought Qin's father and Li Jianhua to his bedroom and opened the gun cabinet to let them choose guns, Chen Mu, who had received his call, had already rushed over. "A lobster that can kill people with one hammer? Is it true?" Although he didn't know whether it was true or not, Chen Mu was very happy when he thought that there were new dishes in the store. "Dad, this gun is good. I think it suits you." Reaching out to take the AR-15, Qin Zhu smiled and handed it to Qin's father. This kind of gun is actually a semi-automatic version of the M16, which is a standard equipment of the US military. Qin Zhu feels good when using it himself. Of course, it is definitely not as good as his Arkansas. "What about mine?" Li Jianhua was holding a long gun and aiming at the window, with a sound effect in his mouth, as if he was really shooting. Qin Zhu took a look and found that it was the Lee Enfield that he had bought the earliest. He smiled and said, "Brother-in-law, you have a good eye. This gun is very famous." "Oh? Tell me about it." Li Jianhua's interest was immediately piqued. Looking at the long gun in his hand, his heart was itching. Qin Zhu smiled and recalled that when he first saw the gun, it seemed to be so unbearable, right? The emotion in his mind flashed through his mind. Qin Zhu sorted out his thoughts and explained with a smile. This semi-automatic rifle is actually the standard equipment of the British Army from 1895 to 1956. It is a very famous rifle with a large number of derivative models. At the same time, it is also the standard equipment of Commonwealth countries, including Canada, New Zealand, Australia and India. Well, that is to say, this is a gun from a long time ago. Li Jianhua, who was originally very interested, suddenly felt disappointed after listening to Qin Zhu's introduction. It turns out that this gun is still an antique. "There's nothing I can do," Qin Zhu shrugged helplessly. "Nowadays, it's good to have a gun. Do you still expect to buy the latest model?" "That's true." With two embarrassed smiles, Li Jianhua became impatient again. Xiao Zhu, let's go practice. I can't help but want to shoot. Don't worry, it will be done in a while. Qin Zhu squatted down and took out 2 boxes of bullets and 2 pistols from the gun cabinet, and then locked the gun cabinet again. Let's go to the shooting range. Ah, there is a shooting range? Li Jianhua exclaimed again, and even Qin's father looked at him sideways. He thought that just shooting a few shots at the sky would be enough. Of course there must be a shooting range, otherwise where can we shoot? Qin Zhu smiled and led the way in front, but thinking about the luxury of the shooting range, he still gave a shot in advance and said, "But the shooting range was not built by me, it was left by the previous rancher. I told you, you have only been here for a short time, how could you even build a shooting range?" Qin's father nodded with some relief, obviously believing what Qin Zhu said. In response, Qin Zhu just laughed a few times and did not make any excuses. When he arrived at the shooting range, the doors opened, and Qin Zhu pushed the door and walked in. As soon as he pushed the door open, a crackling sound and the sound of the rings rising and falling came directly into Qin Zhu's ears. "Hey, who is in such a good mood today, and is still practicing with a gun?" Qin Zhu muttered in confusion, listening to the rings that were almost all 9 and 10 rings. Without hesitation, he strode in. After turning a corner, several familiar figures who were practicing shooting in front finally appeared in front of Qin Zhu. "Hi, Erica, good morning." Looking at the woman in front of him who was holding a rifle in both hands and aiming at the target and preparing to shoot, Qin Zhu smiled and greeted her. Unfortunately, he forgot that she had something in her ears. Erica didn't come back to her senses until a female bodyguard next to her gently touched her. "Hi, boss, good morning to you too." Following the gaze of her subordinates, Erica also saw Qin Zhu and his group. After greeting Qin Zhu with a smile, she also nodded slightly to Qin's father and Li Jianhua. "Good morning, Mr. Qin, good morning, Mr. Li." Qin's father and the other two were a little nervous and uncomfortable when they were greeted by a big horse for the first time. They opened their mouths but didn't know what to say. In the end, they could only nod stiffly. Seeing this, Erica just smiled lightly and cast her eyes on the weapons in the hands of several people. "Boss, are you ready to practice too?" "Yeah, I haven't practiced for a long time." Qin Zhu nodded and looked at the people around Erica. However, after looking around, Qin Zhu didn't find a familiar figure. After nodding to a few unfamiliar female bodyguards, Qin Zhu didn't continue to chat with Erica. He said hello and walked to their side. The area of this shooting range is very large. When Qin Zhu got to the other side, Erica followed him just after he chose a position. "Boss, do you need help?" Erica's face was full of a bright smile as she walked with her long, straight legs. "My shooting level is very good." "Okay, I'd love to." Qin Zhu shrugged and handed over his father's AR-15 with a smile. "How is it? You're used to using the M16, can you still use this?" "Of course." Taking the weapon, Erica smiled confidently, quickly loaded the bullet, aimed, and then pulled the trigger. Pa! 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 3 clear gunshots were heard, and the electronic ring alarm on the opposite side also sounded. 9 rings. 9 rings. 10 rings. Putting down the AR-15 inches her hand, Erica shook her head helplessly. "I haven't used this kind of gun for a long time. I'm really not used to it." Qin Zhu, who was about to applaud to celebrate, put his hands down again with some frustration. "I say Erica, this result is already very good, okay?" "Really?" Erica blinked her big eyes, looked at Qin Zhu with some doubts, and said naturally, "But I basically got 10 rings before." Qin Zhu felt that he could no longer communicate with this woman. How could he forget the identity of this woman? Perhaps, this kind of result is really just good in the army. Qin Zhu could only comfort himself in this way. Shaking his head and ignoring Erica, Qin Zhu turned his gaze behind him and asked with a smile, "Dad, do you want to try it?" "This, okay." Although he is old, Qin's father is still a man after all. Moreover, for this kind of weapon that most men like, he is no exception. After taking the AR-15 from Erica, before Qin Zhu could speak, he had already loaded the gun skillfully and aimed the crosshairs at the target in front. "Hey, Dad, have you played with this thing before?" Looking at his father's skillful movements, Qin Zhu couldn't help but ask with some confusion. Chapter 816 Information Consulting Company. Yes, but that was 20 or 30 years ago. Touching the rifle in his hand, Qin's father sighed for a moment, and his thoughts seemed to return to his youth. Back then, your grandfather was the captain of the village militia, so sometimes we went to the team to shoot targets. Having said this, King's father did not say anything more. However, Kinzu knew what happened later without thinking. It was nothing more than a bit of a bloody thing. Okay, Dad, try a few shots and see if the feeling is still there. Okay, try it. King's father heard the words and woke up from his memories. He smiled and took the gun to the target. Click, click. With a few crisp sounds of bullets being loaded, King's father aimed at the target in a realistic manner and quickly pulled the trigger. Snap. 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 3 rings. 5 rings. 7 rings up. Kinzu touched his nose and looked at his father with a wry smile. Well, Dad, you're pretty good. Need I say that? King's father said, and wanted to take the muzzle of the gun to his mouth to blow on it, to show his superior demeanor. No. No, Dad, you can't do that. 2 exclamations sounded at the same time, frightening King's father's hand and almost dropping the gun. Seeing this, Kinzu hurriedly stepped forward and took the weapon from him. Dad, you must not hold the gun like this. After unloading the bullet, Kinzu looked at his father with a serious expression. Okay, I know. Scratching his head awkwardly, King's father responded with a bit of resentment. In the following time, Kinzu briefly told his father and brother-in-law some matters that needed attention, and then took a pistol and went to play by himself. There was no way, his father didn't let him teach, and his brother-in-law was too lazy to teach. So, he asked Erica to teach Li Jianhua, and he could only play on the side. However, before he could fire a few shots, he was interrupted by the sound of a phone call. Putting down the pistol and unloading the bullets, Kinzu walked over and took a look, and immediately laughed. Hello, Brother Chen, are you here? Of course, I'm already outside the villa. Okay, wait a moment, I'll be there soon. Okay, boss, but please be quick, I can't wait any longer. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu looked at the 2 people who were having fun next to him, and said with a smile, Dad, brother-in-law, you guys play first, I have something to do outside. What's wrong? King's father stopped what he was doing and asked worriedly. It's okay, a friend came to talk about some business with him. Kinzu explained with a smile. Okay, then you go and get busy, I'll play for a while. Hearing that nothing was wrong, King's father was relieved, waved his hand, turned around and picked up the gun again. Kinzu smiled, nodded at his brother-in-law, and left the shooting range accompanied by Erica. Before reaching the door of the villa, Kinzu saw a black Mercedes parked there from a distance. Next to the black Mercedes stood a man wearing a black trench coat, with an excited and expectant look on his face. Who else could it be but Chen Mu? Why are you here so early? Isn't the store busy? Kinzu smiled and hugged him as he approached. As he walked into the villa, he chatted with him casually. It's okay, the business in the store is as hot as ever. Chen Mu shrugged, glanced at the white tiger in the yard cautiously, and then lowered the business and whispered. It's just that the supply of ingredients is a little insufficient. Except for beef, we are short of everything now. This is really a problem. After motioning Chen Mu to sit down opposite, Kinzu's face became a little serious. However, he has become accustomed to this situation. Hasn't he been living like this for the past few months? However, if you want to rely on a ranch to supply all the ingredients for one or even several restaurants, this difficulty must be solved. But don't worry. Looking at Chen Mu who was sitting opposite, Kinzu smiled and said, just wait for half a month, I will raise a precious seafood in the fishery, and then we will have no shortage of precious seafood. Chen Mu nodded without comment. How can marine farming be so easy now? What's more, it is still free range. When a ton of fry is put down, I don't know if we can catch 1% of the adult fish. However, he did not refute it, and did not show this emotion on his face, but smiled and agreed, yes, when the time comes, with the top truffles and top beef, our restaurant will be full. Yes, Kinzu also nodded, but after thinking about it for a while, Kinzu shook his head again. That won't work. We have to put the plan for opening a new store on the agenda. There will be so much beef by then that you will definitely not be able to digest it. That's true. Chen Mu lowered his head and thought for a while, then raised his head and patted his chest to assure. Boss, don't worry, I will start to investigate the whole bossman when I go back this time, and try to get the plan out to you within a month. No. Kinzu stretched out his hand and waved it gently, and said in a very firm voice, I don't have that much time to give you. I will only give you half a month. After half a month, I want to see the plan for opening stores in the whole Boston, including the various districts and counties under it. No, that's absolutely impossible. Chen Mu's answer was also very straightforward. He was not afraid of Qin Zhu getting angry, and spread his hands. Boss, you might as well kill me. You want me to get so many things done in half a month? That's absolutely impossible. Why? Qin Zhu was not really angry, but asked with a smile. Of course it's because there's not enough time, very little. Chen Mu put aside the teacup that Erica handed over, counting on his fingers, and began to explain to Qin Zhu one by one. Boss, look, first of all, before opening the store, we have to walk through the crowded places in the whole city, right? No. Qin Zhu shook his head very simply. What's wrong? Chen Mu was a little anxious. What happened to the boss today? Why didn't he make sense? Sitting up straight involuntarily, Chen Mu looked at Qin Zhu and asked back. Before opening the store, shouldn't we do a market research first? Otherwise, where will we open the store? Are we just going to open it casually? It's very necessary to do a market research before opening a store. Qin Zhu nodded, agreeing with Chen Mu's point of view. But then, just when Chen Mu was getting more and more confused, Qin Zhu spread his hands. Brother Chen, don't you know that there is a kind of company in this world called an information consulting company? Chapter 817 Teddy Bear. Seeing that Chen Mu seemed to understand what he meant, Qin Zhu's smile became even brighter. Brother Chen, you have to know that what we need now is time. As long as we can prepare the restaurant before the beef from the ranch is ready, what does it matter if we spend a little money? I understand, boss. Chen Mu lowered his head in shame. Only then did he truly understand why he was the boss while he was just an employee. Just the way he looked at things was far better than him. I promise to give you the plan for opening a store within half a month. Patting his chest, Chen Mu stood up decisively. It seemed that he was going to contact people and start working now. Hey, let's not rush for a while. Qin Zhu stood up, waved at him, and took the lead toward to the back. Let's go, I'll take you to see the goods first, and you can quickly transport them back and sell them while you are still alive. After Qin Zhu said this, Chen Mu remembered that he didn't come here to report on his work. I came here to see the lobsters, but how could this guy make me want to start working right now? Shaking his head, Chen Mu followed Qin Zhu's footsteps and came to the dock from the back door. When they walked onto the fishing boat and looked at the mantis shrimps still alive and kicking in the cold compartment, Chen Mu's mouth never closed. Damn, how is this possible? Because of the excessive surprise, Chen Mu was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He pointed at the mantis shrimps waving their big claws and showing off to them, and said, Boss, are you sure this is not catalyzed by drugs? Qin Zhu looked at him speechlessly, and suddenly had the urge to hit him. Well. Being looked at by Qin Zhu made Chen Mu feel a little scared. He finally realized that he seemed to have said something wrong. He smiled awkwardly and said, Boss, I didn't say anything about you, really. Well, I believe you. Qin Zhu looked at him with his eyes slanted. Although he said that he believed him, he was thinking in his heart when to give this guy a hard time. Chen Mu felt a chill inexplicably, as if something bad was going to happen. However, the mantis shrimps that were still jumping around in front of him left him no time to think about anything else. Boss, can you lend me this fishing boat? Pointing to the fishing boat under his feet, Chen Mu said helplessly, I didn't call a refrigerated truck when I came. You can just let the fishing boat go along the coast and deliver it directly to the small dock of the restaurant. Hey, that's a good idea. Touching his chin, Qin Zhu couldn't help but think, should I use my boat to deliver food in the future? But after thinking about it for a while, he felt that it was a bit inappropriate. After all, my boat consumes more fuel than a car. Boss, what do you think? After hearing Qin Zhu say it was a good idea, but not agreeing, Chen Mu asked again hesitantly. However, he also felt that Qin Zhu might not agree. Because the fuel consumed by the fishing boat would probably be more expensive than these mantis shrimps. But at this moment, Qin Zhu came to his senses and smiled and waved his hand. Of course there is no problem. I didn't consider this issue at the beginning. You go back first. I'll let Simon come to find you later. Well, that's fine. Chen Mu's expression was a little stunned, but he quickly recovered and waved goodbye to Qin Zhu with a smile. That's it, boss, I'll go back first. Wait a minute, don't be in a hurry. Qin Zhu grabbed Chen Mu who wanted to leave and said with a smile. Since you're here, let's have a good meal before going back. When the boss invited him kindly, Chen Mu naturally couldn't refuse. Besides, he didn't plan to go back at noon. When Kinzu took Chen-Mu back to the villa, he happened to meet Kin's mother and a few women coming back from the greenhouse. "Brother Chen, let me introduce you." Kinzu pulled Chen-Mu over and introduced him one by one. However, his face was full of mischievous smiles. After introducing all of them, Kinzu waved his hand and called Tongton and Lily, who were looking at Chen-Mu curiously. "Come, Tongton, Lily, this is your Uncle Chen, call Uncle." "Hello, Uncle Chen." The two little guys who were greeted by their uncle called out very obediently. Seeing this, Kinzu showed an extremely satisfied smile on his face and turned his head to look at Chen-Mu on the side. "How about it, Brother Chen? It's the first time we meet, shouldn't there be some gift or something?" Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Kin's mother came over to spoil the show. "You kid, it's the first time we meet, what gift do you want?" After teaching her son a lesson, Kin's mother looked at Chen-Mu with a smile. "Xiao Chen, you were offended. This kid just loves to joke with people. Auntie, you are too polite." Chen-Mu said modestly at first, and smiled and said wait a moment, then turned and walked towards his Mercedes-Benz. Then, in the stunned eyes of Kinzu and others, this guy pulled out two brown teddy bear dolls that were at least 1.5 meters long from the back seat of his car. Holding two teddy bears that were almost as tall as him, Chen-Mu walked over with some difficulty and handed the dolls to the two little guys. "Here, it's our first meeting. This is a gift from your uncle. Do you like it?" Looking at the toy doll in front of them that was twice as tall as them, Tongton and Lily looked at their mother with expectation in their eyes. Seeing this, Qinwan looked at her brother, not knowing whether to accept it. Until Kinzu nodded, she smiled and said to her two children, "Why don't you thank Uncle quickly?" "Thank you, Uncle." After saying thank you in unison, the two little guys couldn't wait to take the teddy bear doll that belonged to them from Chen-Mu. Speaking of which, this was the first time the two little guys received a gift, and it was such a large doll. So, the two little guys were still very excited. But, unfortunately, they were too short. Or in other words, they were still too young. And with their current strength, it was obviously impossible to support such a huge doll. So, Qinwan and Zudaimaran each took one directly. Zudaimaran was better. After taking it, she smiled and said to Tongton, "Little girl, I'll keep it for you first and give it to you when I go back." Qinwan was more domineering. After taking the teddy bear, she just smiled and thanked Chen-Mu, and ignored the little guy Lily. Fortunately, perhaps because he was used to being ignored, Lady Lei did not show the slightest unhappiness. Instead, he followed his mother with anticipation, staring at his big teddy bear. Chapter 818 The Prodigal Girl. Not only the two little guys, but also Kinru, this little girl, Chen-Mu prepared a gift for her. A lady's watch worth more than $10,000. In this regard, Kinzu could only sigh that this guy is really a thoughtful person. He originally wanted to see this guy's embarrassed look, but he didn't expect that he had prepared everything. Kinzu knew without thinking that it must be Will who exposed his bottom again. Shaking his head, he took the lead to walk into the villa, but Kinzu's mind suddenly flashed an idea. No wonder the emperors in the past always loved to favor eunuchs. This feeling of being valued is really too good. The lunch was cooked by Kin's mother. Although she knew that Chen-Mu was the chef at that 3-star restaurant, how could Kin's mother let the guests work in her own home? So, Chen-Mu had to sit in the living room and accompany Kin's father and Li Jianhua to exchange business tips. Yes, Kinzu had nothing to do. This guy was sitting on the edge of the sofa, holding an apple and teasing the two little huskies. There was no other way. After learning that Chen-Mu was the person in charge of the restaurant in the United States, how could the two rookies in the catering industry miss such an opportunity to learn from him? Listening to the three people discussing non-stop, Kinzu pouted his lips in boredom and changed his position to make himself more comfortable. However, when he looked at the two huskies in front of him staring at him blankly and not cooperating at all, he scratched his head again. Damn, do you have to be so smart? Where is the stupid husky? He casually threw the apple slices in his hand and let the two guys run over to chase him. He stood up, patted his butt and prepared to take a walk in the kitchen. Woof woof woof. Before he took a step, a crisp dog barking sounded not far away. Looking for the sound, the two guys were actually fighting with Betty again. It turned out that the apple slices that Kinzu threw casually fell right next to Betty. As a result, after picking it up, this guy swallowed it all without hesitation, without even chewing it. As for the two little guys, they were a step late and could only watch helplessly, with nothing to do. Seeing this, Kinzu immediately became interested. He took another red apple, cut it into pieces, and took the two angry little guys and the confused Betty outside. Come and watch. Whoever grabs it first gets it. Holding a small apple slice, Kinzu smiled at the guys in front of him and threw it out. As for the three little guys, their eyes lit up after hearing Kinzu's words. There was no way. Since Kinzu stopped supplying fruits, the good days of these guys were over. From eating whatever they wanted every day to not being able to eat whatever they wanted now, the three little guys were extremely depressed. Oh, that's not right. There are not three little guys, but 5 little guys. Looking at the 2 little guys in front of him who stood up from the white tiger's arms and walked towards this side, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction. This is lively. Kinzu was having fun here, but someone suddenly snatched the apple from his hand. Brother, how old are you? You still play this? Isn't it childish? Kinzu leaned back and lay on his back on the recline. He said unhappily, You silly girl, you have no respect for your age. Believe it or not, I will send you to school. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Kinru was not afraid. Instead, she blinked her big eyes and said excitedly, Okay, I like going to school the most. Kinzu rolled his eyes in frustration and said casually, You're dreaming. You have to help me with farm work at home for half a year, and then I will send you to school. Kinru was stunned for a moment, her little face wrinkled into a ball, and she said coquettishly, Brother, beautiful women are the best. How can you bear to let me do farm work? Kinzu was happy and stopped leaning. He stood up and smiled and teased, There's nothing I can do. Who made you so white? I have to tan you a little so that I can feel at ease letting you go to school. Don't want to? With a bitter face, Kinru raised her little arm and looked at it. What if she got tanned? Kinzu was about to continue to scare the girl a few more times when he heard Kin's mother calling for dinner. After agreeing, Kinzu stood up and stretched his body. Okay, let's go and see what delicious food Mom has made. He walked into the living room and called Chenmu to the dining room. Looking at the more than a dozen delicious dishes on the table, he couldn't help swallowing his saliva. There are not only ordinary home-cooked dishes, such as cold coriander braised lotus root, fried chicken popcorn, spicy pepper meat rolls, fried lamb skewers, salted duck gizzards, crisped pepper and salt fish, and fried clams. There are also big meat dishes such as vinegar and pepper pork knuckles, sweet and sour spare ribs, black bean pumpkin stewed chicken pot, and spring bamboo shoots braised pork. Of course, there are also several vegetarian dishes that are loved by ladies. In comparison, there are still more women here. Well, Mingyo, go to the wine cellar and get the 2 bottles of red wine David sent last time, and we'll finish it. Kinzu rubbed his hands impatiently, motioned to the beautiful Zhu, and pulled Chenmu, inviting his parents to sit down together. When Chenmu heard that he had to drink, he sat down with an embarrassed expression. Boss, let's not have it, I have to drive in the afternoon. Kinzu smiled and waved his hand, motioning Kinru to follow Zhu Mingyo to get the wine, and said, What's the big deal? I'll have someone drive you back in the afternoon. There are many people who can drive on the ranch. Well, okay then. The boss said so, shrugged his shoulders, and Chenmu didn't refuse. Besides, he has been a chef for so many years, and he has never been afraid of anyone when drinking. After a while, the beautiful Zhu and Kinru each carried 2 long wooden boxes up. Is that it? I think only these few have good packaging. Looking at Kinzu, the beautiful Zhu seemed helpless. She really didn't deserve the 2 bottles of wine that David gave her. Kinzu was a little embarrassed when he heard this. He took the small wooden box and looked at it. The corners of his mouth twitched. Why did this little spendthrift woman take out these 2 bottles? These 2 bottles were not given by David, but the non-sale items of Luftmanor that Hunter sent over last time. Although they are not from 1982, their value is not low. He originally planned to collect them, but now, looking around, seeing that everyone was staring at him, Kinzu was really embarrassed to put them back. Besides, we are all family here. Even if we are not family, we are working for him, so it's not a loss. Well, Kinzu could only comfort himself in his heart. As for the spendthrift little woman in front of him, looking at the smiling beautiful Zhu with a squint, Kinzu decided to give her a full set to try Ignite. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significa lo descarga en y subir en esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Tesperama's Paris emerged on un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 819 Popular Mantis Shrimp. This meal was a great pleasure for both the host and the guests. Chen Mu's cooking skills were great, that was for sure. But after all, he had been in the United States for so many years, and he had mainly learned Western cooking techniques. Now, all of a sudden, he tasted so many familiar yet unfamiliar delicacies, and his mouth was full of oil, as if he had just come out of that and had not eaten for several days. Of course, to match the delicacies, a lot of fine wine was also drunk. Even Keen's mother, who had almost never tasted wine, drank a small cup under Keen Yu's persuasion. However, the direct consequence of just this small cup was that Keen's mother slept in the room for an entire afternoon. There was no way this kind of old wine, although mellow, had a good effect of intoxicating people. Even Keen Yu, after knocking Chen Mu down, fell down gloriously. Although Keen Yu and Chen Mu both fell down, the mantis shrimp transported from the ranch to the restaurant was still alive and kicking. After arriving at the restaurant, the lobby manager, who had received Chen Mu's instructions long ago, directly had a few of them placed in the aquarium for the guests to choose from. Of course, because they knew the character and characteristics of mantis shrimps, these guys were taken special care of and were specially placed in a separate aquarium. But even so, it couldn't stop the irritable side of these guys. So, the rockery decoration in the aquarium was unlucky and turned into a pile of debris in a short while. Fortunately, the glass of this aquarium was specially customized, otherwise it would probably be broken even with the glass. At this time, it was already past 5 in the afternoon, and it was the peak dining time. Such a big commotion, of course, attracted the attention of many guests. Oh, God, is this a peacock mantis shrimp? They are so fierce. A fashionable blonde girl looked at the aquarium with admiration. It's unbelievable, how can there be such a big mantis shrimp? An old man with somewhat grey hair stared at the aquarium without blinking, as if there were some rare treasures in it. If I'm not seeing things, then today must be April Fool's Day. A man in a suit and a neat flat head stood up and quickly approached the aquarium, muttering to himself, "Oh, my God, a shrimp can actually knock such a big rockery into pieces. Are those all made of paper?" The lobby manager was very satisfied with the diner's performance, and he had even more ore for his two bosses. However, thinking of the general manager's previous instructions, he cleared his throat and introduced loudly, "As you can see, here is a new type of lobster caught by our restaurant. They are also peacock mantis shrimps, but they are much larger than ordinary mantis shrimps, and their attacks are more fierce." After a brief introduction, the lobby manager in a black uniform looked around with a smile and announced, "Now I announce that these mutant mantis shrimps will be released in the form of auction." As soon as this was said, the diners who were watching immediately started to talk about it. "Hey, auction. It seems very interesting." "Yes, but if it is auctioned, the price is a bit high." "What's the matter? This is an extra large mantis shrimp, it should taste good, right?" "Who knows, I haven't eaten it before." However, true gourmets will not mind these. Before everyone could react, a blonde girl raised her hand first. "I'll pay $500. "Wow." A commotion sounded. Although everyone present was not short of money, judging from the appearance of the mantis shrimp, it would not weigh more than 1 pound, right? $500 a pound? Is it so extravagant? However, before everyone could recover from their surprise, another voice sounded in the noise. "I'll pay $600. When Keen Yu was awakened from his sweet dream by his little sister, it was already past 6 o'clock in the evening. Rubbing his eyes, looking at Keen, who was standing in front of the bed with her hands behind her back, Keen Yu asked weakly, "What's wrong, little girl? Why did you ask me to get up?" Wrinkling her little nose, Keen said with some contempt, "Brother, you are too weak, you fell down after drinking so much." Keen Yu's system was successfully activated by the little girl, and he climbed up and retorted unhappily, "You dead girl, go drink a bottle and try it." After a pause, he lay down again weakly. "Stop talking nonsense, what's the matter with falling down?" Seeing that Keen Yu was in a bad state, Keen did not continue to bicker with him, but came over obediently and helped him massage his temples. "Brother, Mom asked you to get up, and told you to eat before going to bed." Keen Yu hummed comfortably, and then asked, "Where is Chen Mu, is he up?" "Brother Chen, he got up a long time ago. It seems that there is something in the store, so he went back first." Keen said this, but her hands did not stop moving. Thinking of the gift that Brother Chen gave her, she had a very good impression of him. Keen nodded, and did not take it to heart. After letting his little sister rub him for a while, he forced himself to sit up. When Kinzu finished washing and getting ready and came to the living room on the first floor, more than half an hour had passed. Why are you drinking so much wine? Seeing Kinzu coming down, the beautiful Zhu who was helping in the kitchen came out directly. Didn't we say we were going to have dinner? Have you finished eating? Kinzu asked in confusion, looking at the empty restaurant. Puchi. Hearing this, Zhu Mengyo couldn't help but chuckled and said, I specifically asked my little sister to call you in advance. Now it seems that the effect is very good. Kinzu glared at the girl speechlessly. Now she is getting bolder and bolder. She really needs to be disciplined. What are you looking at? We're going to have dinner soon. Being glared at by Kinzu, Zhu Mengyo was not afraid. Instead, she stretched out her little hand and pinched Kinzu's face a few times. Kinzu was completely out of temper at this time. He couldn't help but change the subject and asked, by the way, Mengyo, who saw Chen Mu off when he left? Did he drive back by himself? How is that possible? Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at this guy in annoyance. He was so drunk, how could he still drive? Erica and Aya went to see her off together. Erica drove Chen Mu's car to take her, and I followed in your car. How long did they walk? Kinzu asked in confusion, feeling even more strange in his heart. My mother didn't even invite him to dinner at home. This is a bit unscientific. Yes, how could she not invite him? Zhu Mengyo said in confusion. But he seemed to have something urgent, so he insisted on going back. Chapter 820 Food Poisoning. Of course Chen Mu was in a hurry. Just before he woke up, the lobby manager of the store called him and said that something happened in the store. However, the phone was a bit noisy, and he was also in a dazed state after being drunk, and he didn't figure out what happened. When he hurried to the store, he found that something really happened. Because at this moment, the entrance of the restaurant was flashing neon lights. It's not that the restaurant suddenly turned into a dance hall, but because there were several police cars parked at the door with flashing lights. Such a big scene, of course, there are also boring people watching. Watching the excitement is human nature, and it doesn't mean that you were a foreigner, you don't have this nature. What's going on? After stating his identity, Chen Mu couldn't wait to squeeze through the crowded crowd and found the lobby manager with a bitter face. Seeing Chen Mu coming, the lobby manager, who was a little dejected, suddenly became energetic. General manager, you are finally here. These guys slandered our restaurant for being unclean. Before Chen Mu understood what was going on, he saw a white girl with a smaller stature, wearing a fiery red dress and long fiery red hair, suddenly squeezed out from the side of several white policemen. She was very excited, pointing her finger at the lobby manager Cam Coulson, and loudly refuted. What slander? It's the truth, okay? My sister is still in the hospital and is in a coma. It's all caused by you damn unscrupulous businessmen. Fuck, there can't be any problems in our restaurant, otherwise why are there so many customers, but only you have problems? Cam also refuted the girl with a red face. Regardless of whether it was the restaurant's problem or not, they would definitely not take the blame. If people really think that there is something wrong with the food in their restaurant, then there will be a big problem. Okay, who can tell me what is going on? Rubbing his head, Chen Mu waved his hand to interrupt the dispute between the two and cast his eyes on the police on the side. It's like this, Mr. Chen. The policeman obviously knew Chen Mu. After shaking hands with him politely, he introduced. This, Miss Helena, she accused your restaurant of selling food that caused her sister, Miss Hina, to get food poisoning. What? Food poisoning? Officer Sal, are you sure? After listening to the narration of the white policeman, Chen Mu's eyes changed. Just like what Kim Yu thought just now, his first reaction was that he must not take the blame. Even if it was only temporary, it would not work. Once people determine that there is something wrong with your restaurant, the intangible losses caused are simply unimaginable. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, for now, that's it. The white sheriff named Sal shrugged helplessly. This afternoon, the Hina sisters were dining in the store, but the elder sister Hina suddenly fainted and was rushed to the hospital. And, up to now, she is still in the emergency room of the hospital for rescue. Rescue in the emergency room. Chen Mu's heart slowly sank, and his expression became a little ugly. However, he did not say anything about it, but pointed at the 5 or 6 police officers surrounding the door. Since the results are not out yet, what are you doing? This. Sal looked at Helena with some embarrassment, and said helplessly. Because Miss Hina had an accident in your restaurant, we can only temporarily seal the restaurant. In case something happens, Sal did not say the rest of the words, but everyone present heard it. In case the woman named Ina could not be rescued, this restaurant would not have to be opened. No, absolutely not. As if stimulated by Sal's words, Helena, who was already very emotional, burst into tears. While crying, the girl pointed at Camus and Chenmu with her fingers, choking and scolding. "You profiteers, it's all your fault. My sister had an accident because she ate that mantis shrimp. There must be something wrong with that shrimp." "What mantis shrimp?" Chenmu's heart skipped a beat when he heard the girl's words. "It's the mantis shrimp you auctioned tonight." Helena sobbed and glared at Chenmu and the others with hatred. "It's so big, it must have been induced by drugs. You were a bunch of profiteers. You dared to do anything for money. Enough." Chenmu shouted to cover up his panic and rebuked loudly. "Miss, the police investigation results have not come out yet. It is not certain whether it is a problem with our restaurant. Before the police investigation results come out, if you continue to damage the reputation of our restaurant like this, you can expect to receive our lawyer's letter. That's right, so many customers have eaten today, and everyone else is fine. Why is it that you are the only one who has a problem?" Camus also echoed beside him. He didn't want such a problem to happen in the restaurant where he worked. "Okay, Camus, everything will wait for the police investigation results to come out." Waving his hand, Chenmu signaled Camus to stop talking. Looking at the little girl in front of him who had stopped talking but was still sobbing, he felt a little reluctant. However, now is not the time for him to be full of sympathy. Chenmu retracted his thoughts and turned his gaze to Sal, saying in a very sincere tone, "Officer Sal, Meritage Restaurant is very willing to cooperate with the police in the investigation and evidence collection. Please start." "Mr. Chen, if that's the case, it would be the best." Sal finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to make things too awkward. Although Chenmu couldn't stop their investigation, it would be a bad thing if he was remembered. Although he was not afraid of Chenmu in front of him, the big boss behind this restaurant was not someone a small policeman like him could afford to offend. If there were indeed problems with the restaurant, it would be fine. But if it was finally proved that there was no problem with the restaurant, then those who advocated the investigation would definitely not get any benefits. Waving his hand, Sal instructed the police officers behind him, "Go to the kitchen and take back a copy of all the dishes and ingredients that Helena had eaten tonight for testing." "Fuck, these guys." Seeing the white police officers entering the restaurant one after another, Camus was very indignant, but Chenmu felt a little uneasy. Could it be that the shrimps delivered today were really induced by chemicals? No, it's impossible. Chenmu kept telling himself that the boss wouldn't be so unwise. However, the reality made him a little unsure. While no one was paying attention, he stepped aside, took out his cell phone and called Qinziu. Chapter 821. Influence Expansion. "What, you said someone got food poisoning?" Qinziu, who had just experienced sex and was about to go to bed, was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat after receiving Chenmu's call. He turned over and got out of bed. While looking for clothes, he asked, "What's going on? How could someone get food poisoning?" "I don't know much about it now. The patient is still in the hospital for treatment and the police are investigating the cause, but it is said that the problem is caused by eating the mantis shrimp." After hesitating for a moment, Chenmu still asked, "Boss, is the shrimp really okay?" "This." Qinziu was also a little hesitant. "Damn, how can I know if there is any problem with something just caught from the sea?" However, thinking that his family had eaten it and there was no problem so far, he said uncertainly, "It should be okay. We just caught it and ate it yesterday, and there is no adverse reaction now." That's good, that's good." Chenmu breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of many people who ate it and didn't get hurt, he couldn't help but feel more relieved. As long as there is no problem with the food in his restaurant, it will be fine. "Okay, let's not talk about it for now. Let's talk about it when I get there." Qinziu had already put on his clothes with the help of the beautiful Zhu. He hung up the phone in a hurry and prepared to go out. "Honey, is everything okay?" After hearing the half-understanding, Zhu Mengyo looked at Qinziu with some worry. She rarely saw this kind of expression on this man. No matter when, he was always in a careless attitude. This sudden seriousness gave Zhu Mengyo a bad feeling. Qinziu gently hugged the beautiful Zhu, whose body was a little weak, and a smile appeared on his face. He comforted her. "Don't worry, wife, it's nothing serious. Well, be careful, and be sure to take Dale and the others with you when you go out." Leaning on Kinzu's broad chest, Zhu Mengyo's voice was so gentle that Kinzu couldn't help but want to ravage her. Repressing the desire in his heart, Kinzu lowered his head and opened his mouth, giving her a deep French kiss. After a long time, Kinzu walked out of the bedroom without looking back. In the corridor, the fully armed Aya sisters had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Kinzu coming out, Sister Aya stepped forward and whispered, "Boss, the plane is ready." Kinzu nodded, said nothing, and went straight to the hangar upstairs. A moment later, Kinzu got on the helicopter, accompanied by a roar, and gradually disappeared into the night. Dong dong, there was a knock on the door. Zhu Mengyo in the bedroom had already put on her clothes, as if she had been prepared, and got up and opened the door. "Yo, was it Xiaoxiu who entered out just now?" It was Qin's mother who asked the question, but behind her, Qin's father, Qin Wan and Li Jianhua were all standing there in pajamas. Even the sleepy Qinru squinted her sleepy eyes and stood behind everyone. Yes, there is something urgent that needs him to deal with at the restaurant. In order not to make them worry, the beautiful lady Zhu did not hesitate, and there was no worried expression on her face. Only in her eyes, there was a trace of anxiety that could not be concealed. The old man becomes wise. Qin Wan and the other two just breathed a sigh of relief when they heard it, but Qin's father and mother did not believe it. What urgent matter requires flying to deal with in the middle of the night? However, the two elders did not say anything. After whispering a few words to Zhu Mengyo, they tightened their pajamas and turned back to the room. After all, they could not help at all. The only thing they could do is to pray silently. Pray that their son would not encounter any danger. Kinzu is certainly not in danger now. Not to mention the 4 personal bodyguards who followed him. With his good relationship with the Boston police, they would not watch Kinzu get into trouble. But he is indeed in a lot of trouble now. I don't know how the news spread. Not only was the entrance of Meritage Restaurant surrounded by police, but also many reporters came. Fortunately, the helicopter could land directly on the roof of the restaurant, thus avoiding Kinzu's fate of being surrounded by them. Of course, please do not doubt whether these reporters know Kinzu. The most well-informed people in the world, except for intelligence personnel, are these reporters. After getting off the helicopter, Kinzu wrapped his coat around him and walked downstairs under the protection of 4 female bodyguards in black tights. Just halfway, Kinzu met Chen Mu and his group who were just walking towards him, and asked directly, "What's the situation now?" "Boss, the situation is a little bad." Chen Mu looked at Sal who was following closely beside him, and explained in a low voice, "Half an hour has passed, but there is no news from the hospital." "What about the restaurant? Have you found anything?" Kinzu also nodded to the police beside Chen Mu, but time was urgent now, so he didn't say anything to him. However, Kinzu did not speak to him, but Sal took the lead and introduced with a smile before Chen Mu could speak. "Mr. Clean, our police have not made any progress yet, but we have basically ruled out the suspicion of your restaurant in this matter. Now we are just waiting for the empirical results to come out." "Oh." Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on his face. He stretched out his hand and gently shook hands with the old policeman with a beer belly in front of him. "Mr. Sheriff, I'm really very grateful. Please find out the truth of the matter as soon as possible and give our restaurant a clean name. Of course, this is our duty." When saying this, Sal, who had a small beer belly, had a very serious expression, quite like the usual image of policemen in American blockbusters. Nodding, Kinzu followed a few people and came to the lobby downstairs. At this time, the lobby was a little noisy, and from time to time, there were emotional white people yelling at the police. Kinzu looked a little stunned, turned his head and aimed his puzzled eyes at Chen Mu beside him, wanting to know what was going on. Noticing Kinzu's eyes, Chen Mu sighed, thinking of the subsequent impact of this incident, and said helplessly, "Boss, these are the diners who had dinner with that woman before. They are also a little worried and are waiting for the final result here." Kinzu was silent after hearing this. He knew that if something really happened today, even if their restaurant had no responsibility at all, these customers would stay away from this restaurant. There was no way, this was human nature, no one would put themselves in danger. "We can't let them turn around here, otherwise things will only get bigger and bigger." After pondering for a moment, Kinzu made a decision, stretched out his hand to call Chen Mu over, and whispered a few instructions. Chapter 822 Physical Examination. Massachusetts General Hospital, located in the bustling downtown area of Boston, is a comprehensive medical and surgical institution with 947 beds. According to the latest annual report, it received a total of 48,587 patients, completed 19,131 inpatient surgeries and 22,178 outpatient surgeries in 1 year. In general, this is a large hospital ranked first in Massachusetts and the Boston area. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, dozens of men and women rushed to the hospital entrance, startling the security guards on duty at the door. "Hey, guys, what are you going to do?" Holding the plastic baton in his hand, the white security guard with curly blonde hair spoke with a lack of confidence. "Don't get excited, man." Chen Mu walked out of the crowd with a forced smile on his face, and said, "We're here for a physical examination, really?" "Physical examination?" The white security guard looked at the dozens of men, women, and children in front of him with some suspicion. "Are you kidding me to come to the hospital for a physical examination at night?" But Chen Mu didn't mind his suspicious look. He raised his hands to indicate that he had no weapons, and then led everyone to the emergency department. Now, the white security guard was in a dilemma. Want to stop them? They didn't do anything radical. Maybe they really came to check their bodies. But what if he didn't stop them? What if these guys were going to make trouble? His hard-earned job would be gone again. After hesitating for 2 seconds, he picked up his intercom and called all his colleagues around. After a while, before Chen Mu and his group entered the hospital, there were more than a dozen hospital security guards around them, with vigilant eyes. However, these guys also knew their limits. They didn't rush them out, but followed them all the time. When all the doctors in the emergency department came out and took these people to check their bodies one by one, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Fuck, these guys, did they go to the wrong hospital? One of the security guards wiped the cold sweat from his back and muttered with some dissatisfaction. He was the one closest to Chen Mu just now, and he was just oppressed by the momentum of the two special forces, Erica and Dale. Now that Chen Mu left, he suddenly felt as if he had just escaped from the arms of death. "Why do you say that?" A black security guard next to him asked curiously. "Our hospital is the best in Boston. Isn't it normal for them to come here?" "Normal as." The white security guard seemed to vent some anger and burst out a swear word. A group of people came to check their bodies in the middle of the night. Shouldn't these guys go to a mental hospital? The companions around him were a little speechless, but it seemed that they felt that what this guy said was really reasonable. Of course, Chen Mu, who was waiting in the emergency room, didn't know what happened here. He watched people being taken away by the doctor one by one, and his heart seemed to be bleeding. This is all money. It's really not cheap to let these black-hearted guys work overtime to help his group check their bodies. "Dale, what do you think the boss is thinking?" Chen Mu leaned on the sofa in the waiting area board, looking at Dale beside him whose expression had finally remained unchanged, and asked casually, "Sal has clearly said that this matter should have nothing to do with us. Why do we still need to do full-body examinations for these customers?" "I don't know." Dale's answer was very straightforward and direct, which made Chen Mu, who had just asked casually, feel speechless. Shrugging helplessly, Chen Mu didn't say anything, squinting his eyes and leaning on the sofa, waiting for the results to come out. It didn't matter if he waited, an hour passed in the blink of an eye. Finally, when Chen Mu was about to fall asleep, several doctors came over with a stack of test reports. The leader, a young man in his 50s but in high spirits, smiled at Chen Mu and said, "Mr. Chen, according to our careful examination, most of these people are healthy, only a few have minor ailments of varying degrees." That's good, that's good." After hearing the words of the old man, Chen Mu breathed a sigh of relief and shook hands with him with a smile. "Thank you so much, Dean Karchi. It's so late, and I'm sorry that you still have to worry about such a small matter in your busy schedule." Deputy Dean." Karchi emphasized it first, and then shook hands with Chen Mu with a smile. However, after all, he is old, and if the young master of the Doug family hadn't called him, he really wouldn't have made such a trip so late. He rubbed his tired eyes. Karchi raised his wrist to check the time, and said apologetically, "Mr. Chen, if there is nothing else, I will go back first." Chen Mu heard this and waved his hand and said politely, "You should go back and rest quickly. I don't have anything to do here." After seeing off Vice Dean Karchi, Chen Mu quickly took out his mobile phone and called Qin Zhu. As for Qin Zhu, after receiving Chen Mu's call, he finally showed a smile on his face. "Very good, Brother Chen, the police have also sent news. There is no problem with our Manchu shrinkput self." "Really? This is great. Waving his fist excitedly, Chen Mu hung up the phone and looked at the dozens of diners who were still waiting for news, and said loudly, "Guys, I have good news for you. You are all healthy. Wow, this is great. Thank God, I will never eat such things I have never seen before. Amen, God bless me, I will never be greedy again." Dozens of foreigners who survived the disaster started chatting lively in the lobby of the hospital. Finally, it was not until the security guards came up to them after everyone complained that everyone calmed down. "Okay, it's getting late now. Since everything is fine, let's go back." Needless to say, since everyone's body was fine, at Kinzu's suggestion, everyone dispersed after receiving their test reports. After all, people who can afford to go to such a high-end restaurant don't lack that little money. The main reason why I have to dwell on this matter is that it also involves my own safety, and I was a little impulsive at the moment. What's the saying? This is what it means to be confused when you care too much. With a wave of his hand, Kinzu said goodbye to a group of foreigners who had regained their sanity, hugged each other, and drove back to the restaurant with Dale and Erica. Chapter 823 Jerome. When Chen Mu arrived at the restaurant, the police had also sent the test report. Sal just glanced at it and handed it to Kinzu, apologetically saying, "Mr. Clean, I'm sorry to bother you today. We'll leave now." After receiving the report, Kinzu just glanced at it and saw that it was full of percentages and other things, so he lost interest and handed it to Chen Mu who had just arrived. "Officer Sal, I wonder how Miss Helena is doing now." Kinzu looked around and didn't find the little girl named Helena, so he couldn't help but look at Sal next to him. Although it has been confirmed that the food poisoning of the girl named Helena has nothing to do with his restaurant. But she fell down in his restaurant after all. If this is not handled properly and spread out, his reputation will be ruined. After a moment of silence, Sal still shook his head. The situation is not optimistic. Although gastric lavage has been performed, the effect is not very obvious. Is it so serious? Yes, according to the current situation, she should have eaten something before eating seafood. Now the mixture is a bit serious. Sal sighed, stood up, packed up his things, and turned to walk out. Kinzu heard that, and his mood, which had just recovered, became heavy again. This is a living life, and it can't wither like this. Seeing that Sal was about to leave the restaurant, Kinzu came to his senses and hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Officer Sal, I don't know which hospital Miss Hyena is in now, can I go and see?" "Of course." Sal didn't think much about it and casually said the address of the hospital. In his opinion, as the owner of the restaurant, it was normal for Kinzu to visit the guests who had an accident in the restaurant. Kinzu, who got the address, was about to visit overnight, but was startled by a somewhat excited voice. Boss. Chen Mu held up the test report in his hand and shouted excitedly, "Come and see, we are going to publish." "What's wrong?" Kinzu was a little uncomfortable with his surprise, and quickly stretched out his hand to push this guy away to prevent him from suddenly hitting him. Look here." Chen Mu pointed at a few lines of data on the test report, and the smile on his face was brighter than a flower. The various nutrients of our mantis shrimp were seriously exceeded. Kinzu heard this. Not only did he not show a happy look, but his brows frowned. "They are all exceeded, and you are still so happy." Chen Mu, who was excited, seemed to be choked by someone's neck, and he couldn't speak for a while. "Boss, it's the nutritional content. The nutritional content exceeds the standard." After taking a breath, Chen Mu waved his hands and said excitedly, "This means that the nutritional content of one of our shrimps is far higher than those of ordinary lobsters." Kinzu finally understood a little of this time. He touched his nose awkwardly and asked, "This means that our mantis shrimp is worth the price?" "Worth it, of course it's worth it." Chen Mu nodded without thinking. "Not only is it worth it, but it's not enough. We need to raise the price." Raise the price?" Kinzu's forehead was sweating. He just heard that 1 pound now costs more than $700. Still rising? Yes, if this test is correct. Chen Mu raised the test report in his hand. How can this test report be false? Kinzu looked at him with some doubts. It's not fake. Chen Mu rubbed his swollen head, organized his words, and said, "What I mean is that the content of this test report is not comprehensive. We need a more professional one." "Then what are you waiting for? Send it for a testing." Chen Mu looked at the sky outside, shrugged, and said nothing. Kinzu was stunned, then reacted and touched his nose awkwardly. Well, tomorrow you pick a bigger one and send it to a professional testing agency for a comprehensive test. Okay, I got it. Nodding, Chen Mu watched Qin Zhu get into the car, and then turned and walked back to the store. Brigham and Women's Hospital A. Hospital ranked second in Boston, where Hyena was treated. When Qin Zhu arrived here, it was already past 2 o'clock in the morning. But when he arrived at the emergency room, there were still many people gathered in front of the door. What are you doing here? A little girl who was leaning against the corridor stood up immediately after seeing Qin Zhu, staring at him with two big light blue eyes. I came to see your sister. I'm sorry about this. Qin Zhu no longer had the aggressive momentum he had in the store just now, and he spoke softly. Will being sorry help? Helena's expression was very excited. My sister is still in there for rescue. If anything happens to her, I will never forgive you. Helena, calm down. At this time, a middle-aged white man stood up from a chair by the corridor and gently scolded Helena. No, Dad, I can't calm down. Helena turned around and looked at the door of the emergency room, and her eyes instantly turned red. The middle-aged white man's face was not very good either, and he looked a little haggard. I think he was also worried about his daughter in the emergency room. However, when he turned around and looked at Qin Zhu with an apologetic face, he still showed a reluctant smile. Mr. Qin, I'm sorry. Helena lost her composure a little. It's okay, I can understand her feelings very well. Qin Zhu signaled Dale beside him not to be nervous, and he took 2 steps forward and shook hands with the middle-aged white man. Hello, I'm Qin Zhu. I'm really sorry for what happened today. Hello, Mr. Qin, I'm Jerome Jeffrey, Hyena's father. This middle-aged white man named Jerome had short blonde hair and a typical Western face, with a high nose bridge and handsome appearance. However, at this time, he had a trace of unconcealed sadness on his face. Reaching out his hand, Jerome shook hands with Qin Zhu, and said in a hoarse voice, No one wants to have such a thing. I have heard from the police that this matter has nothing to do with you. Even so, I'm still very sorry. Qin Zhu sighed and turned his head to look at the emergency room. Although this matter has nothing to do with his restaurant, he felt bad when he saw a beautiful life about to disappear. Chapter 824. Turning danger into safety. Time was passing by bit by bit. It was like a giant beast, devouring the darkness before dawn. The sky outside was gradually waking up, and the whole city seemed to come alive and became noisy. In a high-end ward of Brigham and Women's Hospital, on the white bed, a girl who was still hanging on N4 was lying quietly. Doctor, is she okay now? Qin Zhu, who had not slept all night, was a little depressed, but it did not have much impact on his body. After all, the physique that was several times that of a normal person was no joke. It was just that he was okay, but the female doctor in front of him was not very optimistic. Not only were her eyes full of bloodshot, but her expression was also full of fatigue. It's nothing serious. If there is no accident, you can live like a normal person after 2 months of recuperation. Does it take so long? Qin Zhu looked at her in surprise. It's just food poisoning, not a broken arm or leg. Wouldn't it be okay after the toxins are removed? As if she had guessed Qin Zhu's thoughts, the female doctor glared at him unhappily. If she hadn't been concerned about the dean's instructions, she would have turned around and left. How can it be that simple? It took a whole night just to wash her stomach. Although the poison is now resolved, her stomach and intestines have a big problem. She must be hospitalized for treatment. After saying that, the female doctor ignored this guy and turned around and walked towards her office. She wanted to go back and have a good sleep. Just last night, it was really the first time she had experienced this in all her years of practicing medicine. Looking at the female doctor's twisting waist, Qin Zhu shrugged helplessly. Why are women so angry now? Just when he thought of this, he heard the surprised voice of a girl behind him again. Why haven't you left yet? What are you still doing here? Turning his head, Helena's little face with a pair of dark circles under her eyes also appeared in front of Qin Zhu. I say, little sister, it's been a whole night, can you be quiet? Rubbing his head with a headache, Qin Zhu was speechless. This damn girl is really something. I have explained to her so many times that this matter has nothing to do with me. But she just won't listen. According to her words, my sister got into trouble in your store, so you have to take responsibility. Well, Qin Zhu has no way to deal with this. The little girl got angry, and no one can do anything about it. Fortunately, Hyena's parents are quite open-minded and chose to believe the police's explanation. In particular, when Kinzu said that all the medical expenses this time would be his, the two of them looked much better. And when the doctor announced that Hyena was rescued, the two of them faced Kinzu with a smile on their faces. However, in the eyes of the little girl Helena, this was just flattery. For this reason, she even ignored her own parents. After Kinzu hit a soft nail here with Helena, he didn't want to stay anymore. The reason why he stayed here for a night was because he was afraid that Hyena couldn't be rescued. And if that really happened, she would definitely not mind showing off her Chinese medical skills. After all, human life is the most important thing. Now that Hyena is fine, Kinzu has no need to stay any longer. He couldn't stand not sleeping all night. After saying hello to Jerome and his wife who just came out of the doctor's office, Kinzu took Dale and the other girls who looked normal to the restaurant. Of course, they were not there to eat or inspect the work. The helicopter was still parked on the roof of the restaurant. When the helicopter came over the pasture with a thunderous force, it was already early morning. At this time, the cowboys had driven the cattle and sheep out and scattered them on the endless pasture, letting them walk freely. After hearing the sound of the helicopter, the cattle below were a little panicked, and their originally casual pace immediately became a little impatient. Moo. It seemed that something inappropriate for children was going on, but was suddenly interrupted by this big black box. Kinzu certainly didn't know that because of his arrival, the ranch would lose at least several calves in the future. At this time, Kinzu looked at the endless ranch outside the plane window, and inexplicably felt like spring. As the helicopter gradually went away, the cattle that were a little excited just now gradually calmed down. At this time, the cowboys who had been silent just now began to show their power. Snap snap, the crisp and pleasant sound of the whip, accompanied by the cowboy shouts, spread far and wide over this empty ranch. In this early morning when the mist had not yet completely dissipated, the helicopter slowly landed, the cabin door opened, and a pink figure rushed up. "You are finally back. Why is no one answering your phone?" Throwing herself into Kinzu's arms, the beautiful Zu's voice was a little choked. Is there? Kinzu held Zhu Mengyo's slender waist with one hand, letting her little head bury in his chest, while with the other hand he took out his mobile phone from his pocket. It seems to be out of power. Looking at the mobile phone in his hand that had already turned into a black screen, Kinzu was a little embarrassed. After all, I used to keep my mobile phone in my hand. How come I didn't think about my mobile phone at all when I came to the United States? Kinzu was just thinking about it when he heard a burst of hurried footsteps at the door of the hangar. "I guess it's my uncle and auntie. You should go out and take a look." When the beautiful Zhu heard the footsteps, her face turned slightly red, and she broke free from Kinzu's arms. Just when he was about to continue to pull this girl back, he saw that she had already run out. Kinzu had no choice but to wave his hand to signal Dale to lower the glass cover, and then he hurried to meet her. "Xiao Zhu, are you okay?" When Kin's mother saw that Kinzu was intact, she couldn't help but feel relieved. She held Kinzu and wouldn't let him go. She stood there and kept looking him up and down. "Mom, what can happen to me?" "Don't worry." Kinzu felt uncomfortable being looked at, but he really couldn't do anything about it when facing his mother. "You ran out in the middle of the night and said you were okay. Who would believe you?" Kin's mother muttered unhappily. Although there was some blame in her tone, she still let Kinzu go. "I can't help it. There is an emergency in the store and I need to take care of it." Kinzu shrugged, took the lead and walked downstairs, and said with a smile, "Mom, you two old people, just relax. I'm such a big person, I won't get lost." Chapter 825 Out of Stock Crisis. Kinzu returned to the villa and did nothing. He went to the bathroom to take a nice hot bath. When he came out, he was naked and went straight into the warm bed. He waved to the beautiful Zhu who was helping him to tidy up his clothes not far away with a sly smile. "What's wrong?" The beautiful Zhu was still holding clothes in her hands. Seeing Kinzu waving, she didn't think much and came over directly. But he knew that she had just reached the bedside, but was pulled to the bed by Kinzu. "Hee, nothing, just want to sleep." As he said, Kinzu's big mouth came close. Poor beautiful Zhu didn't have time to react, and she felt that her little mouth was blocked by something, and she couldn't speak for a while. After a long time, Zhu Mengyo, who was a little weak, came back to her senses from that wonderful feeling. "Don't make trouble, it's broad daylight." Using all her strength, beautiful Zhu finally escaped from the arms of the big bad wolf. Standing by the bed, she sorted out her messy clothes and gave someone a charming little eye roll. "Go to bed quickly. You've been tired all night. Aren't you afraid that your body can't stand it?" "How could that be?" After being escaped by Zhu Mengyo, Qin Zhu smacked his lower lip with a bit of regret, and said with expectation, "Mengyo, come on, sleep with me for a while." "No way." The thin-skinned beauty Zhu was embarrassed by this naked invitation. She put down her clothes and ran out in a hurry. When she reached the door, she looked back and saw Qin Zhu's expression was a little disappointed. The beauty Zhu stopped again. Just when Qin Zhu thought that there was light at the end of the tunnel, he saw the beauty Zhu bit her lower lip tightly and said with some embarrassment, "Husband, it's broad daylight, there are so many people, let's wait until night." When the word husband came out, Qin Zhu shuddered all over, feeling that the body and mind were comfortable. It's okay, wife, you go and do your work first, we'll see you in the evening." Qin Zhu waved at Zhu Mengyo with a pair of squinting eyes, and then he lay down. The somewhat embarrassed beautiful Zhu was amused by Qin Zhu's lazy look and laughed out loud. But seeing that he had already laid down, she did not go in again. After helping Qin Zhu to gently close the bedroom door, she walked downstairs quickly. Of course, whether she was afraid of being bullied by someone after entering, that is unknown. Although Qin Zhu did not have a warm and beautiful woman in his arms, he slept very soundly. When he opened his eyes in a daze, he looked out the window. "Oh, it's not dawn yet? Oh, we're really early today." Rubbing his sleepy eyes and sitting up, Qin Zhu felt something was wrong before he finished sighing. "It's not even dawn yet, why is there no one around him?" Turning his head and looking around, Qin Zhu slapped his forehead. "It's not morning yet, it's already dark." Qin Zhu got off the bed in a daze and went to the bathroom to wash up, then he woke up. They say staying up late is the biggest killer of women, I think it's almost the same for men. Rubbing his handsome face, Qin Zhu walked downstairs while thinking to himself. When he got downstairs, he saw that everyone was quite present. The whole family, including Dale, Erica and Eva, were sitting there. "Hey, why is this girl here to join in the fun?" Looking at Erica who was chatting happily with the beautiful Zhu, Qin Zhu was a little confused. "Wow, the lazy pig got up." A somewhat childish exclamation attracted everyone's attention. "Xiao Zhu, wake up, come and sit down." Qin's mother glared at her little daughter, then waved at Qin Zhu with a smile on her face. "Okay, Mom, you haven't eaten yet?" Qin Zhu looked around and then walked over as she was told. However, when passing by the naughty little girl, Qin Zhu taught her how to respect her brother. Well, pinching her little face and rubbing it, the little girl would not let go until she begged for mercy. There was no way, Qinru. Please rub it. Why be polite? Finally, he asked the beautiful Zhu to come over and pull Qin Zhu and his sister apart, and handed him his mobile phone. "Look, so many people called you today, and I didn't dare to answer it. Why not?" Qin Zhu took the phone, flipped through it, and said with a smile, "In the future, when I don't see it, you can answer it for me first and ask him what's the matter." Zhu Mengyo smiled, said nothing, turned around and continued to talk with Qin's mother. At this time, Qin Zhu also saw several missed calls on his mobile phone. In addition to Doug and Chen Mu, there was actually one who he didn't know. Looking at the place of origin, it was still from China. "It's from China, which bastard changed the number again?" Qin Zhu muttered in confusion, and he didn't pay attention to it, but called Doug back first. Things have their priorities, and returning a call also depends on one's status. People with high status naturally need to return the call as soon as possible. What if the other person has something good in mind for you? What a pity it would be if you missed it. Fortunately, Douglas didn't bring him any good news. He just asked about the situation yesterday out of concern. Seeing that Qin Zhu was fine, he hung up the phone with relief. Chen Mu, on the other hand, brought Qin Zhu good news. "Boss, I have sent the sample to the research institute. We only need to wait for 3 to 5 days to get a comprehensive test report." Qin Zhu sat up straight when he heard this. He is also very concerned about this matter now. However, after being fooled for a long time, he doesn't believe in the nutritional components that have been studied. "Brother Chen, do you think this shrimp is so good? Why don't I feel anything after eating it?" Chen Mu was choked by this question and couldn't speak for a long time. After a long while, he said uncertainly, "Maybe you don't eat enough. Eat less." After Chen Mu said this, Qin Zhu seemed to think of something, but he forgot it as soon as he changed his mind. "Yes, this is not a medicine. You need to take it regularly to be effective." As if he had found the correct answer, Chen Mu nodded vigorously. "It must be like this. It will be effective only if you take it regularly." It would have been better if he didn't say it. After he said this, Kinzu suddenly realized a problem. Well, Brother Chen, how many mantis shrimps do we have left? There should be a few thousand. Chen Mu was also a little unsure. He didn't know how to pull them directly from the boat. Thousands? Kinzu was silent after hearing this. Thousands, it sounds like a lot. But it depends on what kind of base it is based on. Just based on a store that sold more than 100 on the first night, it won't take long for them to be out of stock, right? Fin DS capture much as great as Pelaga has to L final. No SE indeed all like Busgasms content to exclusive YXO in Mediato. Siascrabaton news Patreon. Rukurada, card alike, Siascripsino Donaking knows anima continued. Great as a Todos knows Vemos on Alpxmodo.